The child's frozen fingers still clutched the note when Jonas found her. No one's child. 3 words that would shatter a man who'd spent 4 years running from ghosts. But here's what the railroad depot officials didn't know, what that little girl didn't know. When Jonas Rourke lifted her dying body from that freight car, he wasn't just saving a life. He was signing his own death warrant. Because the men who left her there to freeze, they were counting on her silence. And the moment Jonas chose to fight for her, he painted a target on both their backs. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Grace's story travels. The morning Jonas Rourke found the girl, the sun had already turned vicious. It was the kind of heat that made horses mean and men meaner, the kind that baked the truth out of liars and drove saints to the whiskey barrel. Jonas had ridden into Salvation Creek Depot with nothing on his mind except picking up fence supplies and getting back to his ranch before the afternoon turned the valley into a furnace. He'd been making this same trip every month for 4 years, ever since Emily died, and every month it got a little easier to pretend he was still among the living. But today the universe had other plans. You hear that? Old Pete Branson was standing by the freight platform, one weathered hand cupped to his ear. Jonas swung down from his horse, boots hitting dust. Hear what? That. Pete pointed toward the line of freight cars. Been hearing it for 10 minutes now. Sounds like... hell, I don't know what it sounds like. Jonas listened. At first, there was nothing but the usual depot noise. Men shouting, wheels grinding, steam hissing from the morning train. Then he heard it. A cough. Faint, wet, desperate. The kind of cough that said someone was losing a fight with their own lungs. Could be a cat, Pete offered, but his voice carried no conviction. Jonas was already moving. He'd heard that sound before, in field hospitals during the war, in the bedroom where Emily spent her last 6 weeks. It was the sound of someone drowning on dry land, and it was coming from the 3rd freight car. The door was sealed. Not locked, sealed. Someone had driven 8-penny nails through the latch housing, 4 on each side, bending the tips so they couldn't be pulled. This wasn't standard railroad procedure. This was someone making sure whatever was inside stayed inside. Jonas, you can't just... Pete started, but Jonas had already grabbed a crowbar from the depot office. The first nail screamed as it came out. The second bent, and Jonas had to work it back and forth, his shirt soaking through with sweat. By the 4th nail, he could hear the coughing again, weaker now, more liquid. By the 8th, his hands were bleeding. The door rolled open and the smell hit him like a fist. Urine, vomit, fear, and something else. Something sweet and wrong, like fruit left too long in the sun. She was crumpled in the far corner, half hidden behind a stack of burlap sacks. At first glance, Jonas thought she was a pile of rags someone had forgotten. Then the rags moved, and he saw the small hand, the tangle of dark hair, the dress that might have been blue once but was now the color of everything lost and abandoned. Jesus Christ. Jonas was inside the car before his brain caught up with his body. Jesus Christ, there's a child in here. Pete appeared in the doorway, took one look, and went white. I'll get the doctor. Get him now! Jonas knelt beside the girl, his knees cracking against the wooden floor. Up close, he could see she was maybe 7, maybe 8. It was hard to tell with the way her skin clung to her bones. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her breathing shallow and rapid. When he touched her forehead, her skin was furnace hot. That's when he saw the note. It was pinned to her dress with a rusted safety pin, the paper cheap and wrinkled, the handwriting crude but deliberate. 3 words in charcoal. No one's child. Something inside Jonas cracked, not broke. It had been broken for 4 years. This was different. This was the sound of ice splitting, of frozen rivers remembering how to flow. Who does this? He whispered. Who leaves a baby to die like garbage? The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were brown, deep brown, the color of creek water in shadow. They fixed on Jonas' face with an intensity that made him lean back. You... Her voice was barely there, a ghost of a sound. You're the man... Don't talk, sweetheart. Save your strength. She said, You'd come. The girl's hand moved weakly toward him, fingers grasping at nothing. She said, You'd save me. Then her eyes rolled back and her body went limp. No. Jonas scooped her up, shocked at how light she was, like holding a bundle of kindling. No, no, no. Stay with me, little one. Stay with me. He was out of the freight car and running before Pete could close his dropped jaw. The girl's head lolled against Jonas' chest, and he could feel how wrong her breathing was. Too fast, too shallow, fighting for purchase in lungs that weren't cooperating. Men scattered from his path. Someone shouted something about procedures, about the sheriff, about orphan protocols. Jonas didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because in that moment, holding that dying child, he wasn't the broken man who'd been sleepwalking through life for 4 years. He was the man who'd once ridden 3 days without stopping to bring medicine to a fever-struck family. He was the man who'd pulled a drowning boy from a flash flood while everyone else stood frozen on the bank. He was the man Emily had fallen in love with, the one who moved when others hesitated. Dr. Samuel Harlan's office was 3 blocks from the depot. Jonas kicked the door open so hard it cracked against the wall. "Sam! Sam!" The doctor appeared from the back room, medical bag already in hand. Sam had been in Salvation Creek long enough to know that when Jonas Rourke kicked down your door, you grabbed your supplies first and asked questions later. "What have you—" Sam's words died when he saw the child. "Sweet Mother of God, examination table now." Jonas laid her down as gently as he could. In the better light, the girl looked even worse. Her dress was torn in places, stitched in others with inexpert hands. Her feet were bare and filthy, the soles cracked and bleeding. Around her neck was a thin leather cord with a small wooden cross, the kind you could buy for a penny at any general store. Sam's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, breathing, eyes. How long was she in that freight car? Don't know. Train came in from Willow Ridge this morning, but it might have picked up cars from further east. She's severely dehydrated. Fever's dangerous. 104, maybe higher. Lungs are congested. Sam looked up, and Jonas saw something in his eyes that made his blood turn cold. "Jonas, I need to be straight with you. This child is dying. Whatever she's been through, it's pushed her right to the edge." "Then pull her back." "I'm going to try, but—" "No." Jonas' voice came out harder than he intended. "No buts. You save her, Sam. Whatever it takes." Sam held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll need your help. And I'll need Clara Whitwell. This child needs round-the-clock care, and I can't leave my practice." Clara, Emily's older sister. Jonas hadn't spoken to her in 3 months, not since their last argument about him wasting away on that ranch. But if there was anyone in Salvation Creek who could help save this child, it was Clara. "I'll get her," Jonas said. "And Jonas?" Sam was already preparing a fever reduction treatment, mixing powders with water. That note. No one's child. Someone wanted her found dead. The question you need to ask yourself is, what happens when they find out she's alive? Jonas looked down at the girl. Even unconscious, even dying, there was something about her that nagged at him. Something familiar in the shape of her face, the set of her jaw. "Then they'll have to come through me," he said quietly. Butson. Clara Whitwell's house sat on the respectable side of town, the part where ladies served tea on porcelain and men tipped their hats on Sunday. Jonas had always felt like an intruder here, even when Emily was alive. Now, standing on Clara's porch with blood on his shirt and desperation in his chest, he felt like a barbarian at the gates. He knocked, waited, knocked again harder. The door opened, and Clara's expression went from irritation to shock in the space of a heartbeat. She was a handsome woman, 10 years older than Emily had been, with the same dark hair though shot through with silver. She'd never married, had dedicated her life to teaching and community work and judging Jonas for not being good enough for her baby sister. "Jonas Rourke, what on earth? I need your help." The words came out rough. Jonas wasn't used to asking for things, and Clara wasn't used to him asking her for anything. "There's a child. She's dying. Sam Harlan says he needs you." Clara's irritation evaporated. "A child? What child?" "I found her in a freight car at the depot. Someone left her there to die, Clara. She can't be more than 7 or 8 years old, and she's—" Jonas's voice cracked. "She's the same age Emily would have wanted our children to be." It was a low blow, and he knew it. Emily's inability to have children had broken both their hearts. But it was also the truth, and Clara's face softened. "Let me get my bag," she said. They ran. By the time they reached Sam's office, the girl was seizing. Her small body convulsed on the examination table, back arching, fingers clawing at air. Sam was trying to hold her steady while getting medicine between her clenched teeth. "Clara, thank God." Sam didn't look up. "I need cool water, every clean cloth you can find, and that fever tincture in the blue bottle, top shelf, far right." Clara moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been in crisis situations before. Within minutes, she had the girl's dress cut away and was applying cool compresses to her chest and forehead. Jonas stood back, feeling useless, watching as these two fought to pull the child back from whatever edge she was teetering on. The seizure lasted 90 seconds. It felt like 90 years. When it finally stopped, the girl lay still, too still, and Jonas felt his heart stop with her. Then she took a shuddering breath, and another, and Sam let out a breath of his own. "That's it, little one," Clara murmured, her hands gentle as she smoothed the girl's sweat-soaked hair. "That's it. Stay with us." "Will she make it?" Jonas asked. Sam wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "The next 24 hours will tell. If the fever breaks, if we can get fluids and medicine into her, if her lungs clear, then maybe. But Jonas, she's been severely neglected. This didn't happen overnight." Jonas moved closer, looking down at the girl. With her face cleaned and her hair smoothed back, that nagging familiarity grew stronger. Something about her features, the shape of her eyes. "Do you recognize her?" Clara asked, noticing his stare. "No, but there's something—" Jonas shook his head. "I don't know." "Jonas," Sam's voice was careful. "About that note, I think you should take it to Sheriff Blackwood." "Why? So he can file it away and forget about it?" "So there's a record. Someone put this child on that train. Someone nailed that door shut. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. If she dies, it's murder. If she lives—" Sam paused. "If she lives, someone might come looking to finish what they started." The thought made Jonas's jaw tighten. "Let them come." Clara made a small sound that might have been disapproval or might have been something else. "Sam's right, Jonas. This needs to be official. But first, this child needs constant care. I'll stay with her tonight, but I'll help," Jonas said. "So I can done." Both Clara and Sam looked at him in surprise. "Jonas, you don't have to—" Clara started. "Yes, I do." He didn't know how to explain the pull he felt toward this child, the way her small hand had reached for him in that freight car, the way she'd said, "You're the man," as if she'd been expecting him. "She's got nobody else. The note said it, no one's child. Well, maybe she can be someone's child now." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Jonas." "I'm not saying—" Jonas rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm just saying she deserves someone fighting for her. And I can fight. I'm good at fighting." "I know you are," Clara said softly. "That's why Emily loved you." The words hit Jonas in a place he'd thought was armored. He looked away, blinking hard. "She's stable for now," Sam said, breaking the moment. "But she needs quiet, rest, and constant monitoring. Clara, if you can take the first watch, I'll check back in 2 hours. Jonas, you should go see the sheriff, then get cleaned up. You look like you've been through a war." Jonas glanced down at his blood-stained shirt, his torn-up hands. "Feels like it." As he turned to go, the girl made a small sound, something between a whimper and a word. They all froze. Her eyes were still closed, but her lips were moving. Jonas leaned close. "What is it, sweetheart? What are you trying to say?" "Grace." The word was barely there, a breath with consonants. "My name. Grace." Jonas felt something shift in his chest. "Grace. That's a beautiful name." She said— Grace's breathing hitched. "She said you'd protect me, like you protected her." "Who said that, Grace? Who told you about me?" But Grace had slipped back under, her face smoothing into unconsciousness. Clara looked at Jonas with wide eyes. "Jonas, how would this child know you?" "I don't know." But even as he said it, pieces were starting to shift in his mind. The familiar features, the brown eyes, the way she'd reached for him as if she knew him. "I need to see that note again." Sam handed it over. Jonas studied it in the light, turning it over. The paper was cheap, the kind you'd find in any mercantile. But on the back, so faint he'd almost missed it, were 2 more words in different handwriting, smaller, neater, desperate, Emily's promise. The world tilted. "What is it?" Clara was beside him, reading over his shoulder. When she saw the words, she gasped. "Oh my God! Jonas, do you think—" "Emily had a sister," Jonas said slowly. "Her younger sister, Margaret. She moved east after Emily and I married. Went to Kansas City last we heard. Emily and Margaret weren't close. There was some falling out before Emily and I even met. But Emily always talked about going to find her, about making things right. She said she'd made a promise to their mother to look after Margaret, no matter what." "I remember," Clara whispered. "Margaret was troubled, wild. Mother died worrying about her. Emily carried that guilt until—" She stopped. "Until she died," Jonas finished. "She made me promise right at the end that if Margaret ever needed help, I'd give it. She made me swear on our wedding rings." Sam was looking at the girl with new eyes. "You think this child is Margaret's daughter?" "I think someone wanted me to think that," Jonas said. "Or someone knew Emily's promise and used it to make sure this child got to me. Either way, someone went to a lot of trouble to put Grace on that train with my name in her head and Emily's promise on her back." "But who would do that?" Clara asked. "And why?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Jonas carefully folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "Grace said she said you'd protect me. If Margaret sent her daughter to me, if Emily's sister is out there somewhere—" He looked down at the unconscious child. "Then Margaret might be in danger too. Or dead, he didn't say, but they all heard it." "Jonas," Clara put her hand on his arm, "even if this child is Margaret's daughter, even if she's Emily's niece, you can't just claim her. There are laws, procedures. The county will want to place her in an orphanage until proper family can be verified." "No." The word came out flat and hard. "No orphanage. I made a promise to Emily, and I'm keeping it. If Grace is family, she stays with family, and if she's not—" Jonas paused. "If she's not, then she's a child who needs someone, and I'm someone who needs something to fight for besides ghosts." Sam and Clara exchanged a look, one of those long married couple looks, even though they'd never been married or a couple. Finally, Sam nodded. "All right. But Jonas, you need to do this right. Talk to Sheriff Blackwood. Get the paperwork started. And you'll need help. That ranch of yours is no place for a sick child alone." "I'll help," Clara said immediately. "If Jonas is serious about this, and I can see he is, then I'll come out to the ranch until Grace is recovered. It's what Emily would have wanted." Jonas felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Clara said dryly. "I intend to make your life difficult with my opinions and my rules. But that child needs people who'll fight for her, and the Whitwell women have always been fighters." Despite everything, Jonas almost smiled. "I remember." He took one last look at Grace, at her small face, peaceful now in sleep, at the rise and fall of her chest that said she was still here, still fighting. Then he headed out into the brutal afternoon sun, his mind already turning over what he needed to do. First, Sheriff Blackwood. Then he'd ride out to the depot and find out everything he could about that train, about where it came from, about who might have put a 7-year-old girl in a freight car and nailed the door shut behind her. Someone had tried to kill Grace. And if Jonas was right, if she really was Emily's niece, then someone had known exactly what they were doing when they put Emily's promise on her back. "Like you protected her," Grace had said. But Jonas hadn't protected Emily. He'd watched her die slowly, helplessly, while fever ate her from the inside, and he could do nothing but hold her hand and lie about how everything would be fine. He'd failed Emily, but he wouldn't fail her promise. Whatever it took, whoever came for Grace, Jonas would be ready. The child the world called no one's was someone's now. She was his, and he'd burn the whole damn valley down before he let anyone take her. Sheriff Roy Blackwood's office smelled like old coffee and older regrets. Jonas pushed through the door to find the sheriff at his desk, papers spread before him, reading glasses perched on his nose like an owl settling in for wisdom. Blackwood looked up, saw Jonas, and sighed. "Should have known." Pete Branson was just in here talking about you tearing apart a freight car like a mad bear. Want to tell me what... He stopped when he saw Jonas's face. What happened? Jonas dropped into the chair across from the desk without being invited. There was a child in that freight car. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Someone left her in there to die. Blackwood's expression went from tired to granite. You're certain? Door was nailed shut from the outside. 8-penny nails bent over. She was dehydrated, burning with fever, half dead when I found her. Jonas pulled out the note and slid it across the desk. And she had this pinned to her dress. Blackwood read the note, turned it over, read the other side. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, this is attempted murder. Attempted nothing if I hadn't heard her coughing. Whoever did this meant for her to die in that car. You said her. The child's alive? She's at Doc Harlan's. Clara Whitwell's helping care for her. Sam says the next day will tell, but... Jonas leaned forward. Roy, the girl's name is Grace, and before she passed out, she said something about someone sending her to me. Someone who told her I'd protect her. Blackwood's eyes sharpened. You know this child? No, but look at what's written on the back. Emily's promise. Emily had a sister, Margaret. They were estranged, but Emily made me swear that if Margaret ever needed help, I'd give it. What if Margaret sent her daughter to me? What if Grace is Emily's niece? That's a lot of what-ifs, Jonas. Then help me turn them into facts. That train came in from Willow Ridge this morning. I need to know where it originated, what route it took, when that freight car was added. Someone put Grace on that train, Roy. Someone nailed that door and expected her to die before anyone found her. Blackwood pulled off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. You're asking me to investigate a crime that crosses county lines, possibly state lines. That means telegrams, coordination with other jurisdictions, and a whole lot of time I'm not sure we have. Make time. Jonas? She's 7 years old. Jonas didn't realize he'd stood until he was leaning over the desk, palms flat on the papers. She weighed nothing, Roy. Nothing. Like someone had been starving her for weeks. And when she looked at me, when she reached for me... He stopped, struggling with the words. Someone hurt that child. Someone tried to kill her. And if she's Emily's family, if she's the daughter of the promise I made, then she's my family. So I'm asking you as a friend, help me find who did this. Blackwood met his eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. I'll send telegrams to Willow Ridge and every depot east of there. I'll talk to the depot master here, find out what he knows about that freight car. And I'll start the paperwork to make you the child's temporary guardian, assuming she survives and assuming you're serious about taking her in. I'm serious. Jonas, you know what you're taking on? A child, especially a sick child, changes everything. Your whole life becomes about them. No more long cattle drives, no more handling ranch business on your own schedule. And if someone did try to kill her, if they find out she's alive and in your care, then they'll find out what happens when someone threatens a Rourke. Blackwood almost smiled. There's the man I remember. The one who rode with Captain Morrison's Rangers. The one who cleaned out the Garrett gang when everyone else said it couldn't be done. He stood, extending his hand. All right, Jonas. I'll do what I can. But you need to be smart about this. Whoever put that girl on the train, they're dangerous. And if they're willing to kill a child, they won't stop just because one rancher's in their way, Jonas finished. He shook Blackwood's hand. I know, but I've been dying slow for 4 years, Roy. Maybe this is what I needed, a reason to start living again, even if that reason comes with danger attached. Emily would have liked that, Blackwood said quietly. She always said you were at your best when you had someone to protect. Jonas felt the familiar ache in his chest, the Emily-shaped hole that never quite closed. Yeah, she was right about most things. As he turned to leave, Blackwood called after him. Jonas, one more thing. I'm going to need to talk to the girl once she's conscious. If she can tell us anything about who put her on that train, where she came from. When she's ready, Jonas said. Not before. She's been through enough. Agreed. But Jonas, the longer we wait, the colder the trail gets. Jonas nodded and pushed out into the afternoon heat. The sun had shifted, throwing the main street into sharp relief, all hard edges and unforgiving light. He squinted against it, his mind already moving to the next task. He needed to get back to the ranch, make arrangements for Clara to stay in the guest room, prepare the house for a child. He needed to check on Grace, make sure she was still breathing, still fighting. He needed to... Jonas Rourke. The voice came from his left, smooth and cultured and wrong. Jonas turned to find a man standing in the shadow of the general store awning. He was dressed too fine for Salvation Creek. Tailored suit, silk vest, shoes that had never seen an honest day's dust. His face was handsome in a calculated way, and his smile never reached his eyes. "Do I know you?" Jonas asked. "Not yet, but you will." The man stepped forward, and Jonas's hand instinctively moved toward his belt, old habits from old wars. "My name is Victor Langford. I'm the county land registrar, and I've just heard a very interesting story about you pulling a child from a freight car this morning." Jonas felt his shoulders tense. News travels fast. In small towns, it always does. "I understand you've taken this child to Dr. Harland and enlisted Clara Whitwell's aid. Commendable. Very commendable." Langford's smile widened. "However, as the county registrar, I have certain responsibilities regarding abandoned children, especially children who arrive in the county under mysterious circumstances." "She's not abandoned. She has family." "Does she?" Langford tilted his head like a curious bird. "And you can prove this family relationship?" Jonas's jaw tightened. "Not yet. But then legally, she's a ward of the county until proper guardianship can be established. Which means, Mr. Rourke, that I'll need to take custody of the child once she's recovered enough to be moved." "Like hell!" "I understand your emotional attachment. It's very heroic, what you did this morning. But the law is clear. Without documented proof of family connection, the child must be placed in county care. There's an excellent facility in Red River, about 30 miles from here, clean, well-run, and she's not going to any facility." Jonas took a step forward, and Langford, to his credit, didn't flinch. "That girl was left to die in a freight car. Someone nailed the door shut and expected her to suffocate or starve. You want me to believe she'll be safer in some county facility? I understand your concerns, but the law exists to protect children, not endanger them. And without proper documentation, I'm afraid I can't simply hand over a minor to a bachelor rancher with no legal claim." Langford's eyes glittered. "Unless, of course, you have proof of this supposed family connection?" Jonas wanted to hit him, wanted to wipe that smug smile off his face and watch him fall. But he forced himself to stay calm. "I'll get the proof. Give me time." "Time is precisely what I can't give, Mr. Rourke. The longer this child remains in undocumented care, the more irregular the situation becomes. I'll need to file a report with the county within 48 hours, and if you can't produce satisfactory evidence of kinship by then..." Langford shrugged. "Well, then I'll have no choice but to execute my duty as registrar." "You son of a bitch!" "Language, Mr. Rourke. We're civilized men." Langford adjusted his hat. 2 days, 48 hours, and then family or not, that child becomes county property. He tipped his hat and turned away. "Good day." Jonas stood frozen, watching Langford disappear into the general store. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to drag the man into an alley and beat some sense, or at least some humanity, into him. But that wouldn't help Grace. That would only land Jonas in jail and leave the girl defenseless. 2 days. He had 2 days to prove Grace was Emily's niece, 2 days to find Margaret or find proof of the connection, 2 days before the county could take the child he'd just decided was worth living for. Jonas turned and ran back toward Doc Harlan's office, his mind racing. He needed to talk to Grace again, needed to find out everything she could tell him about her mother, about where she came from, about who had put her on that train. But when he burst through the doctor's door, it wasn't Sam who met him. It was Clara, and her face was pale. "Jonas, thank God. Grace woke up a few minutes ago and started screaming. We couldn't calm her down. She was terrified, fighting us. She kept crying for her mother, saying, 'They're coming, they're coming.' We finally got her calmed, but Jonas," Clara's voice dropped. "She's traumatized. Whatever happened to her, it wasn't just physical abuse. Someone terrified this child." Jonas moved past her into the examination room. Grace was awake, propped against pillows, her brown eyes huge in her thin face. When she saw Jonas, she started crying again, but this time she reached for him. You came back, she whispered. You came back. Jonas crossed to her side and took her small hand in his. Of course I came back. I told you I would. But the man said, Grace's breathing hitched. He said bad things happen to people who help me. He said I'm cursed. He said anyone who takes me in will... She couldn't finish. Who said that, Grace? Who told you those things? But Grace just shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. He'll find me. He always finds me. That's what Mama said before. Before what, sweetheart? Before she stopped breathing. Grace's voice was barely audible. She coughed, and then she stopped, and the man came and he said I had to go away because I was nobody's child now. He put me in the dark place, and I was so scared, and it was so cold, and I thought I was going to die like Mama, but then I heard your voice and you opened the door, and... She looked up at Jonas with those heartbreaking eyes. Are you the man Mama told me about? The one who married her sister? The one who fights bad people? Jonas felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Your mama was Margaret? Margaret Whitwell? Grace nodded. She said if anything bad happened, I should find Jonas Rourke. She said you promised to take care of family. She said you were the only one who could keep me safe from him. From who, Grace? Who are you afraid of? But before Grace could answer, the door opened and Sheriff Blackwood walked in, his face grim. Jonas, we need to talk. Now. Jonas looked from Grace to Blackwood and back. He wanted to stay, wanted to hear everything Grace could tell him, but the sheriff's expression said it couldn't wait. Clara, stay with her, Jonas said. Grace, I'll be right back. You're safe here, I promise. But the man... No one's going to hurt you, not while I'm here. Jonas squeezed her hand gently. That's my promise to you, and I keep my promises. Out in the front office, Blackwood waited until the door closed before speaking. I got a telegraph back from Willow Ridge. That freight car originated in Kansas City, picked up 3 days ago. It had been sitting in a rail yard for 2 weeks before that. 2 weeks? With Grace inside? No. Grace was added to the cargo somewhere between Kansas City and Willow Ridge. The depot master there remembers the car coming through but says it was sealed when it arrived, which means someone put her in there and nailed that door shut somewhere on the route. Jonas, Blackwood hesitated. The manifest for that car lists it as carrying mining equipment bound for Denver, but mining equipment doesn't require sealed doors. Someone paid to have that car treated special, and they paid enough that nobody asked questions. So whoever did this has money and influence. And patience. They planned this, Jonas. They knew that car would be sitting in Willow Ridge overnight before getting rerouted here. They knew it would be hot enough to kill a child in hours. This wasn't some desperate parent abandoning a baby. This was calculated murder. Jonas felt cold despite the afternoon heat. Grace just told me her mother died. She watched Margaret die. Coughing, she said, just like... He stopped. Like Emily, Blackwood finished quietly. Jesus, Jonas. You think it's the same thing? I don't know, but Margaret was Emily's sister. If they both died the same way... Jonas rubbed his face. I need to find out everything I can about Margaret. Where she was living, what happened to her, who this man is that Grace keeps mentioning. Jonas, there's something else. Blackwood pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I asked around about Victor Langford, the county registrar. He only took the position 3 months ago, came up from Texas, supposedly. But his credentials are clean, his references check out, and he's already made friends with half the county officials. So I don't trust him. Something about him feels wrong, and my guts kept me alive this long. Blackwood handed over the paper. This came in on the afternoon mail. It's an official notice from the county office, filed by Langford 2 hours ago. He's officially claimed Grace as an abandoned ward of the county and is seeking immediate custody once she's medically cleared. Jonas stared at the paper, disbelief turning to anger. 2 hours ago? I talked to him less than an hour ago. He filed this before he ever spoke to you. Jonas, he was never giving you 48 hours. That was theater. He's already started the legal process to take Grace. Why? Jonas looked up, searching Blackwood's face. Why would a county registrar care this much about one orphaned child? There must be dozens of kids who need placement. Why target Grace specifically? That, Blackwood said grimly, is exactly what I intend to find out. But Jonas, you need to understand, legally, his claim is solid. Without proof of kinship, without documentation showing you as Margaret's designated guardian, a judge will side with the county. Then I'll get the proof. How? Margaret's dead, and even if you could find records of her death, that doesn't prove she wanted you to have Grace. Jonas thought fast. The note, Emily's promise. Someone knew about the promise Emily made me swear to. Someone knew I'd honor it. But can you prove that in court? Can you prove that note came from Margaret and not from some stranger who heard a rumor? Jonas looked back toward the examination room where Grace lay recovering, where she'd reached for him like he was her last hope in a world determined to destroy her. He thought about Emily, about the promise he'd made with her last breath. He thought about 4 years of sleepwalking through life, of going through motions without meaning. Then he thought about the feel of Grace's hand in his, about the way she'd said you came back like it was the most amazing thing in the world. I'll find a way, he said. I don't care what it takes, what I have to do, who I have to fight. That child is family, and family doesn't abandon family. Blackwood studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, then here's what we're going to do. I'll start digging into Langford's background, quietly. If he's as interested in Grace as he seems, there's a reason, and I want to know what it is. You focus on finding proof of the connection between Grace and Margaret. Birth records, letters, anything that shows Margaret wanted you to have her daughter. And if I can't find it in time, then you better be prepared to fight a legal battle that could take months. And Jonas, Blackwood put his hand on Jonas's shoulder. Be careful. Someone left that child to die. If they find out she's alive, if they think you're getting close to figuring out who they are, they'll come for her, Jonas finished. And when they do, I'll be waiting. As Blackwood left, Jonas stood alone in the front office, listening to the sounds of the town outside. Horses, wagons, people going about their normal lives, while somewhere in that examination room, a 7-year-old girl fought to stay alive against enemies she was too young to understand. Jonas had been a soldier once. He'd tracked outlaws through desert and mountain. He'd faced down men who'd kill you for looking at them wrong. But standing there, knowing that somewhere out there was someone who deliberately tried to murder a child, he felt a cold fury settling into his bones that he hadn't felt since the day he'd hunted down the men who'd killed his father. Someone had hurt Grace. Someone had hurt Margaret. And if Jonas was right, someone might have hurt Emily too. He didn't know who yet, didn't know why. But he'd figure it out. And when he did, God help them. Because Jonas Rourke had just remembered why men used to fear his name. The ranch house looked smaller than Jonas remembered as he guided his horse up the familiar path 3 hours later. Maybe it was the late afternoon light, throwing long shadows across the yard. Maybe it was knowing that tomorrow this place would have a child in it again, something it hadn't known since Emily died. Or maybe it was just that he'd stopped really seeing the place years ago, when every room became a reminder of what he'd lost. Clara sat beside him in the wagon, Grace wrapped in blankets between them, still weak but insistent she could leave the doctor's office. Sam Harland had protested, but Grace had looked at Jonas with those heartbreaking eyes and whispered, "Please don't leave me in the town. He'll find me there." So Jonas had loaded up the wagon with medicine, instructions, and Clara's disapproving commentary and brought them both home. "It needs work," Clara said as they pulled up to the house. It wasn't a question. "It needs a lot of things." Jonas set the brake and climbed down, then reached up for Grace. She weighed nothing, and when he lifted her, she pressed her face against his shoulder like she was trying to disappear into his protection. The house did need work. That much was undeniable. 4 years of a bachelor living alone had taken its toll. Dust coated every surface. Dishes sat piled in the kitchen. The guest room where Clara would sleep probably had mice. But it was solid, defensible, and most importantly, it was far enough from town that anyone coming for Grace would have to cross 2 miles of open valley to reach them. Jonas had chosen this location for exactly that reason when he'd built the place with Emily. She'd wanted something beautiful. He'd wanted something safe. They'd compromised. Beauty with good sightlines and escape routes. Let me see the room where she'll sleep, Clara said as Jonas kicked the front door open. Inside, the house still held ghosts. Emily's needlework hung on the walls, faded now, but still there. Her books lined the shelf by the fireplace. Her rocking chair sat by the window where she'd spent her last months watching the valley, pretending she'd get strong enough to walk outside again. Grace stirred in Jonas's arms. "It smells like her," she whispered. Jonas froze. "What?" "Like Mama said." Grace's eyes opened, taking in the room. "She said Aunt Emily's house would smell like lavender and wood smoke and home. She said it would be the safest place in the world because you built it to keep the bad things out." Clara made a soft sound, her hand going to her mouth. Jonas just stood there, holding this child who knew things she shouldn't know, who spoke about Emily like she was still alive in these walls. "Your mama told you about this place?" he asked carefully. "She told me lots of things. After she got sick, she talked all the time, like she was trying to put all the words inside me before—" Grace's voice trailed off. "Before she ran out of time," Jonas finished gently. He carried Grace to the bedroom, his and Emily's room, the one with the best light and the warmth from the kitchen stove. He'd been sleeping in the spare room since Emily died anyway, unable to face the bed they'd shared. "This was Emily's room, your aunt's room. You'll be safe here." He laid Grace on the bed, and Clara immediately began fussing with pillows and blankets, her hands moving with the efficiency of someone who needed tasks to hold back emotions. Jonas stepped back, watching Grace sink into the mattress like she'd been walking on broken glass for months and had finally found solid ground. "There's a pump in the kitchen," Jonas said to Clara. "I'll bring in fresh water. The stove needs stoking, and there's food in the cold room. Not much, but enough for tonight. Tomorrow I'll ride into town for supplies." "Tomorrow you'll do no such thing." Clara's voice was firm. "Tomorrow you'll stay here with Grace while I go to town. You're not leaving this child alone when someone might be hunting her." Jonas wanted to argue, but Clara was right. He'd brought Grace here to keep her safe, which meant staying close. "All right, make a list of what you need, but Clara, be careful. Ask questions quietly. If anyone's watching—" "I know how to be discreet, Jonas. I've been managing just fine in this town for 50 years without your instruction." But her voice softened, "Though I appreciate the concern." As Clara headed to the kitchen, Jonas pulled a chair beside the bed. Grace was already half asleep, but her hand reached out, fingers curling around his. "Tell me about your mama," Jonas said quietly. "Tell me about Margaret." Grace's eyes fluttered. "She was beautiful. Even when she got sick, she was beautiful. She had dark hair like yours, and she sang all the time, and she made me laugh even when we didn't have food." A tear slid down Grace's cheek. "We lived in a room above a tavern in Kansas City. It was loud and it smelled bad, but Mama made it nice. She hung curtains she sewed from old dresses, and she told me stories every night about growing up with Aunt Emily in a place called Salvation Creek." "That's here," Jonas said. "This is Salvation Creek." "I know. Mama said that's where we'd go when she got better. She said we'd come here and you'd forgive her for the bad things she did, and we'd be a family again." Grace's voice broke. "But she didn't get better. The coughing got worse, and one day she coughed up blood, and she couldn't stop shaking. I tried to help her, but I didn't know what to do. I was so scared." Jonas squeezed her hand gently. "You did everything you could, sweetheart." "The man came that night. Mama was already gone. I knew she was gone because she wasn't breathing anymore, and her eyes were open but empty. He knocked on the door, and when I didn't answer, he broke it down. He was tall and thin, and his smile was wrong, like it didn't belong on his face. He looked at Mama, and then he looked at me, and he said, 'Perfect. Right on schedule.'" Jonas felt ice in his veins. "Right on schedule? What did he mean?" "I don't know. I tried to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed me and put something over my face, something that smelled sweet and made everything go dark. When I woke up, I was in a wagon. It was night, and we were moving fast. I could hear men talking outside, the tall man and someone else. They were arguing about me." "What did they say?" Grace's breathing hitched. "The tall man said, 'The mother's dead. The child's worthless now. Just dump her somewhere.' But the other man, his voice was different, smoother. He said, 'No. Send her to Rourke. Let him watch another one die. Let him know it's his fault.' Then the tall man laughed and said, "You really hate him that much?" And the smooth man said, Grace's grip tightened on Jonas's hand. He said, "He took everything from me 16 years ago. Now I take everything from him." Jonas stopped breathing. 16 years ago. 1869. The year he'd ridden with Captain Morrison's Rangers. The year they'd hunted down the Garrett gang after they'd massacred a family outside Red River. The year Jonas had put a bullet through Daniel Garrett's chest and watched his brother Victor Garrett disappear into the Badlands with a promise to return. Victor Garrett. Victor Langford. "Oh God," Jonas whispered. "What?" Clara appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Jonas, what is it?" But Jonas was already on his feet, his mind racing through connections he should have seen earlier. Victor Langford, appearing 3 months ago from Texas. Victor Garrett, last seen heading south toward the border. A man who'd sworn revenge on Jonas for killing his brother. A man who'd disappeared for 16 years, just long enough to build a new identity, climb into a position of power, and plan his revenge. A revenge that involved killing Emily's sister and sending her daughter to die. "Jonas, you're scaring me." Clara moved closer. "What did Grace say?" "I need to see Sheriff Blackwood." Jonas grabbed his hat. "Now." "But you said you wouldn't leave. Lock the doors, load the rifle. You remember how?" When Clara nodded, Jonas continued, "Anyone comes to this house except me or Roy Blackwood, you shoot first and ask questions never. Understand?" Clara's face went pale, but she nodded. "Jonas, what's happening?" "Something I should have figured out hours ago." Jonas looked down at Grace, who'd fallen into exhausted sleep. "Someone tried to kill her to hurt me, which means she was never the target. I was. And if I'm right about who's behind this, then Grace isn't just in danger. She's bait." He was out the door and on his horse before Clara could respond, his mind already cataloging every interaction with Victor Langford, every word, every gesture, the smooth confidence, the calculated interest in Grace, the filing of custody papers before their conversation. It all made sense now. Victor Garrett hadn't disappeared 16 years ago. He'd been planning, building, waiting for the perfect moment to strike at Jonas where it would hurt most, through family. First Emily. Had she really died of natural fever? Or had someone helped her along? The same way Margaret had died coughing blood? Then Grace. Send her to Jonas, make him care, make him fight for her, and then take her away legally, using the system, so Jonas would be helpless to stop it. Watch him suffer the way Victor had suffered watching his brother die. It was perfect. It was patient. It was exactly the kind of revenge a man might plan over 16 years. Jonas pushed his horse harder. The sun was setting, throwing the valley into deep shadow. 2 miles had never felt so long. Every second he was away from the ranch was a second Grace and Clara were vulnerable. But he needed Blackwood, needed the law on his side before Victor made his next move. Because there would be a next move. Men like Victor Garrett didn't wait patiently for the system to work. They stacked the deck, loaded the dice, and made sure every outcome served their purposes. By the time Jonas reached Salvation Creek, full dark had fallen. Lights blazed in windows, and the saloon was already filling with men who'd worked hard all day and wanted to forget it all night. Jonas rode straight to Blackwood's office and nearly pulled the door off its hinges getting inside. Blackwood looked up from his desk, took one look at Jonas' face, and reached for his gun belt. "What happened?" "Victor Langford is Victor Garrett." The sheriff froze. "Say that again." "The county registrar who's so interested in Grace? He's Victor Garrett, Daniel's brother, the one who got away 16 years ago. He's been planning this, Roy. All of it. Margaret's death, Grace being sent to me. It's revenge." Blackwood's face went through several expressions before settling on grim determination. "You're sure?" Grace heard them talking. The night her mother died, a man came. Tall, thin, wrong smile. He took Grace and argued with another man about what to do with her. The other man said to send her to me. Said I took everything from him 16 years ago. Said he wanted to watch another one die. Jonas leaned over the desk. "It's him, Roy. It has to be." "But Langford's credentials are forged. Have to be. Victor Garrett was smart, educated, came from money before his brother went bad. He'd know how to build a new identity, how to get papers that would pass inspection. Jonas slammed his hand on the desk. We need to arrest him, now, before he what? Jonas, even if you're right, we have no proof. The word of a traumatized 7-year-old about a conversation she overheard while drugged? No judge would issue a warrant on that. Then what do you suggest? Jonas's voice was tight with frustration. Wait for him to make another move? Let him take Grace legally while we gather evidence? I suggest we be smart. Blackwood stood, moving to the window. If Langford really is Garrett, if this is about revenge, then he's been planning it for 16 years. He won't make mistakes now. We need to outthink him, not outdraw him. How? Blackwood turned back and Jonas saw something calculating in his eyes. The same look the sheriff used to get during the war when they were planning ambushes. By giving him what he wants, or making him think we are. Explain. Garrett wants you to suffer, wants you to care about Grace and then lose her. So we let him think that's happening. You fight the custody battle, you make a scene, you show everyone how much you want to keep her. Meanwhile, I dig into Langford's background, quietly, through channels he won't expect. If his credentials are forged, there'll be seams. There always are. And if you don't find them in time, then we pray Grace can testify to what she heard. But Jonas, you need to understand something. Blackwood's voice dropped. If Langford really is Garrett, if he's been planning this for 16 years, then Margaret's death wasn't random. He killed her, or had her killed, specifically to send Grace to you. Which means he knew about Emily's promise. He knew about the connection between Margaret and your wife. Jonas felt sick. How would he know that? That's what worries me. Either he's been watching you for a very long time, or... Blackwood hesitated. Or what? Or someone told him. Someone close enough to Emily to know about the promise. Someone who knew about Margaret. Blackwood met Jonas's eyes. Someone in this town. The implications hung between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Jonas wanted to reject it, wanted to believe that Emily's secrets had died with her. But Blackwood was right. There was no other way Victor could have known about the promise unless someone had told him. Who? Jonas asked. Who would betray Emily like that? I don't know, but if there's a spy in Salvation Creek, if someone's been feeding Garrett information... Blackwood didn't finish. He didn't have to. Jonas thought about everyone he'd talked to today. Doc Harland, Clara, Pete Branson at the depot master who'd been so quick to accept the sealed freight car, the deputy who'd arrived at his ranch the night Emily died to deliver the official death certificate. Too many people, too many possibilities. What do I do? Jonas asked, and hated how defeated he sounded. You go home. You protect Grace. You let Langford file his custody papers and you fight him in court like a law-abiding citizen. And you trust me to find the proof we need. Blackwood pulled on his coat. But Jonas, you need to be prepared. If I'm wrong, if we can't prove Langford is Garrett before the hearing, then the law will give him custody of Grace. And once he has her, he'll kill her, Jonas finished. Slowly, painfully, where I can watch and be helpless to stop it. That's his revenge, not my death, but my torture. Which is why we can't let it get that far. Blackwood checked his pistol. I'm going to start asking questions tonight, quietly. Meanwhile, you take these. He pulled a folder from his desk. Legal documents, temporary guardianship papers. They won't stop a court order, but they'll slow things down, make it harder for Langford to just walk onto your ranch and take Grace. Jonas took the papers, his mind still reeling. 16 years. Victor Garrett had waited 16 years for revenge. Had he been planning it the whole time, or had something triggered it recently? Roy, when did Langford arrive in Salvation Creek? 3 months ago. Why? 3 months ago was when Margaret died. Grace said her mother got sick fast, started coughing 1 week, dead within the month. What if Garrett was watching Margaret, waiting for the right moment? What if he poisoned her, made it look like natural illness, knowing she'd send Grace to me with her dying breath? Blackwood's face hardened. Then we're not just dealing with revenge. We're dealing with a man who's willing to murder innocent women to hurt his real target. That's not just dangerous, Jonas. That's evil. I know. Jonas folded the papers and tucked them inside his coat. which is why I need to get back to the ranch. If Garrett's been planning this for 16 years, he'll have contingencies. He'll expect me to figure it out eventually, which means he's already planning his next move. As Jonas turned to leave, Blackwood called after him. Jonas? One more thing. The freight car manifest. I got the full report back. That car didn't just come from Kansas City. It was specially commissioned by a mining company called Garrett Consolidated. They paid for priority shipping and special handling. Jonas felt his blood turn to ice. He used his own company name? It's arrogant. It's also brilliant. Who'd suspect a legitimate business of human trafficking? And if anyone did investigate, the company has layers of shell corporations and false addresses. It would take months to unravel, months we don't have. So he's not even hiding anymore. He's rubbing it in our faces. Looks that way, which means either he's supremely confident or Blackwood's voice trailed off. Or he's already so far ahead that it doesn't matter if we know who he is, Jonas finished. Because by the time we can prove it, Grace will be dead, and I'll be broken, and he'll disappear again with a new name and a new identity. Not if I can help it, Blackwood said grimly. Get home, Jonas, protect that girl, and trust me to handle this end. Jonas nodded and headed back into the night. The ride home felt twice as long, every shadow a potential threat, every sound making him reach for his gun. His mind kept cycling through everything Grace had told him, everything he'd learned, trying to find the pattern, the weakness, the angle he could use to beat a man who'd spent 16 years planning his revenge. By the time he reached the ranch, the moon was high, and the valley was silver-black with shadows. Jonas approached carefully, watching for any sign of disturbance. But everything looked quiet. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen window, Clara's signal that all was well. He stabled his horse and approached the house, his hand never leaving his pistol. The front door opened before he could knock, and Clara stood there with the rifle, her face tight with worry. Thank God, she breathed. I've been watching the clock for an hour. What happened? Jonas stepped inside and locked the door behind him. Is Grace asleep? Finally. She fought it, said she needed to stay awake in case the man came. I had to promise her you'd be back before she'd close her eyes. Clara set the rifle down. Jonas, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. I've seen a ghost that's still alive. Jonas moved to the kitchen window, checking the sightlines to the valley. Victor Langford is Victor Garrett, Daniel's brother, the one who got away. He's been planning this for 16 years, Clara. Margaret's death, Grace being sent here, all of it. It's revenge. Clara's face went pale. Oh my God. Then Emily. I don't know. Maybe. Her illness came on fast, too. Same as Margaret's. Same coughing, same fever, same... Jonas couldn't finish. The thought that Emily's death might not have been natural, might have been murder, was too much to bear. Clara moved to his side, her hand on his arm. Jonas, you can't think like that. Not now. Right now you need to focus on keeping Grace safe. Emily's gone. We can't bring her back. But Grace is here. She's alive. And she needs you clear-headed and focused. How can I be clear-headed when everything I thought I knew is a lie? When the woman I loved might have been murdered, and I didn't even... Jonas's voice cracked. I should have protected her, Clara. That was my job, and I failed. You didn't fail. You couldn't have known. Clara's voice was fierce. But you can protect Grace now. You can make sure Emily's sacrifice, her promise, wasn't in vain. That child in there? She's alive because of you. She's safe because of you. Don't you dare dishonor Emily's memory by giving up now. Jonas looked at his sister-in-law, this woman who'd lost a sister, who'd never approved of him, who'd spent 4 years blaming him for Emily's death, even though she never said it out loud. And now she was here, in his house, helping him protect a child neither of them had known existed a day ago. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Helping me. Helping Grace. You could have walked away. Clara smiled sadly. Because Emily loved you. Because that child in there is family. And because... She paused. Because I've been alone too long. And maybe this is God's way of telling me that family isn't just blood. It's who you choose to fight for. Before Jonas could respond, a sound came from the bedroom, a scream, high and terrified. They both ran, Jonas reaching the door first. Grace was sitting up in bed, her eyes wild, her breathing coming in gasps. The man! The man with the wrong smile! He's here! He's... Grace saw Jonas and lunged for him, her small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. Don't let him take me! Please don't let him take me! Shh, sweetheart. It was just a dream. Jonas held her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. No one's here. You're safe. But he will come. He always comes. That's what Mama said. She said the man with the wrong smile always gets what he wants. Grace pulled back, looking at Jonas with eyes too old for her face. She said he killed Aunt Emily. She said he'd kill me too, unless you could stop him. Jonas and Clara exchanged looks. Grace, Jonas said carefully, did your mama tell you the man's name? Grace nodded. She said he used to be called something else, but now he calls himself Langford, Victor Langford. She said he was the devil wearing a fancy suit. Clara gasped. Jonas just held Grace tighter, his mind racing. Margaret had known. Somehow, she'd known who Langford really was, what he'd done, which meant Garrett had been in Kansas City, had been close enough to Margaret to poison her, and she'd known she was dying from his hand. Grace, did your mama write anything down? Any letters? Any papers? She tried. The night before she died, she was writing something, but the tall man took it when he came. He looked at it and laughed and said, "Too late, Margaret. Should have written to your precious Jonas years ago." Then he burned it in the stove. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. But Mama was smart. She knew he'd come. So she made me memorize things. What things? A song. Aunt Emily's favorite song. Mama said if I sang it to you, you'd know I was telling the truth about who I was. She said Emily used to sing it every night before bed, and nobody else would know it. Grace took a shaky breath, then began to sing, her voice thin but sweet. Hush now, my darling, the stars know your name. The moon keeps you safe from all sorrow and shame. The wind whispers stories of love without end, and I'll be beside you, your mother, your friend. Jonas felt like he'd been hit by lightning. That song. Emily had sung that song every night of their marriage. It was something her mother had sung to her, something she'd said she'd sing to their children if they ever had them. He'd forgotten about it, had buried it with everything else Emily shaped. But hearing it now in Grace's voice, it all came rushing back. That's it, Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. That's Mother's lullaby. I haven't heard it in 30 years. Mama said only family would know it, Grace continued. She said it was proof I belonged to you, and she made me memorize other things too, important things about the man with the wrong smile. What things, sweetheart? Grace closed her eyes, concentrating. She said he came to her 3 months ago. Said he knew her sister Emily had married Jonas Rourke. Said he had a message from you, that you wanted to see her, to make things right after all these years. Mama was so happy. She'd been wanting to come home for so long, wanting to introduce me to you. Jonas felt sick. He tricked her. Yes, he came to our room with papers, legal papers, he said, about Emily's estate. Said there was money owed to Mama as Emily's sister. Said you'd sent him to help settle things. Mama believed him. She signed the papers and drank the tea he brought, and Grace's voice wavered. That's when she started getting sick. First just tired, then coughing, then the blood. It happened so fast. Did your mama figure out what he'd done? Not at first, but then he came back a week later when she was really sick. He sat in our room and smiled his wrong smile and told her the truth. Said Emily had died the same way, from the same poison. Said you'd failed to protect Emily, and you'd failed to protect me too. Said watching you lose everyone you loved was his life's work now. Grace opened her eyes. That's when Mama knew she was dying. She used her last strength to write the note, to get me ready. She told me to be brave, to find you, to tell you everything. She said you were the only one who could stop him. Clara had her hand over her mouth, tears flowing freely now. Jonas just held Grace, his own eyes burning. Margaret had known she was dying, had known her daughter was in danger, and she'd used her last moments to try to save Grace by sending her to the one man she thought could protect her. Your mama was very brave, Jonas said roughly, and very smart. She got you to me, Grace. Against all odds, she got you here safely. But he'll take me away. That's what he wants, isn't it? To take me away from you and hurt me where you can watch. Grace looked up at him. Mama said that's what devils do. They don't just kill you, they make you watch everyone you love die first. Then we won't let him. Jonas set Grace back against the pillows gently. I made a promise to your Aunt Emily, and I'm making a promise to you now. I will not let Victor Garrett or Langford or whatever he's calling himself hurt you. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I will keep you safe. But how? He's got the law on his side. He's got papers and power, and I've got something he doesn't. Jonas smoothed Grace's hair back from her forehead. I've got a reason to fight that's stronger than his reason for revenge. He wants to hurt me, but I want to protect you. And a man fighting for someone else is always stronger than a man fighting for himself. Grace studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Mama said you'd say something like that. She said you were the kind of man who'd ride into hell for family. Then your mama knew me pretty well for someone I never met. She said Emily told her all about you in letters. Before the falling out, they used to write every month. Emily would tell stories about the brave rancher she'd married, the man who'd fought outlaws and built her a house where she'd always be safe. Grace's voice grew drowsy. The medicine Sam had given her finally taking effect. Mama kept all the letters, had them in a box under our bed. But the tall man took those too. Took everything except what was in my head. What's in your head is enough, Jonas assured her. Now sleep, Grace. Clara and I will watch over you. When you wake up, we'll figure out our next move. But Grace was already drifting off, her breathing evening out, her small hand still clutching Jonas's sleeve like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. Clara and Jonas stood there for a long time, watching her sleep, both of them processing everything they'd just learned. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. He poisoned Emily. That bastard poisoned my baby sister, and we just thought it was fever. We watched her die and never knew. We don't know that for certain, Jonas said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, we do. Margaret knew. She recognized the symptoms because they were the same. Oh God, Jonas, Emily suffered for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of coughing and fever and pain, and all that time he was probably watching, enjoying it, planning his next move. Clara's hands clenched into fists. I want him dead. I want him to hurt the way he made Emily hurt. He will, Jonas said quietly. One way or another, Victor Garrett will answer for what he's done. But not with frontier justice. That's what he expects. He wants me to lose control, to go after him with guns blazing, to give him an excuse to kill me legally in self-defense. No, we're going to beat him the way he's trying to beat us, with patience and planning. And if that doesn't work? Jonas met her eyes. Then I'll do what I should have done 16 years ago when I had the chance. I'll put him in the ground and damn the consequences. Clara nodded slowly. Good, because that child in there deserves justice. Emily deserves justice. And Margaret, her voice broke. Margaret tried so hard to get her daughter to safety. The least we can do is make sure her sacrifice means something. They stood vigil over Grace for another hour, taking turns watching from the window, checking the yard, making sure no shadows moved where they shouldn't. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, Clara spoke again. Jonas, there's something you need to know about Margaret and Emily's falling out. Jonas turned to her. What about it? It was about a man. Margaret had gotten involved with someone dangerous. Emily tried to warn her, tried to get her to come home. They fought about it, said terrible things to each other. The last letter Emily sent came back unopened, and after that, Clara's voice was heavy with old regret. After that, Emily never tried again. She always felt guilty about it, always wondered if Margaret was safe, made her sick with worry. And you think the man Margaret was involved with was connected to Garrett? I think it's too much of a coincidence otherwise. A dangerous man in Margaret's life, and years later she's killed by Garrett. Jonas, what if Margaret was involved with Victor Garrett himself? What if Grace is— Don't, Jonas said sharply. Don't say it. Grace is Margaret's daughter, and that's all that matters. But Clara's words had planted a seed of doubt. What if Grace wasn't just Margaret's daughter? What if Victor Garrett was her father? Would that change anything? Would that make this even more twisted? A man trying to kill his own daughter to hurt Jonas? The thought made Jonas sick. But looking at Grace, sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knew how long, he realized it didn't matter. Blood didn't make family, choice did. And he'd chosen to protect this child the moment he'd lifted her from that freight car. Whatever came next, whoever Grace really was, one truth remained constant. She was his to protect now. His promise. His purpose. And Victor Garrett was about to learn that some promises were worth dying for. Dawn broke cold and gray over the valley, the kind of morning that promised nothing good. Jonas hadn't slept. He'd spent the night moving between the window and Grace's bedside, his rifle always within reach, his mind cataloging every sound the darkness brought. Clara had finally dozed off in the rocking chair around 3, but even in sleep her hand stayed near the pistol Jonas had given her. Grace stirred as the first light touched her face. Her eyes opened, and for a moment Jonas saw panic there, the instinctive terror of waking in a strange place. Then she saw him, saw the familiar shape of his silhouette against the window, and her breathing steadied. "You stayed," she whispered. "Told you I would. Mama used to say that grown-ups make promises they don't keep, but you're different." Grace pushed herself up on the pillows, wincing. Her fever had broken during the night, but her body still carried the evidence of weeks of neglect. "My chest hurts." "That's the medicine working. Dr. Harlan said you'd feel worse before you felt better." Jonas moved to her side, checking her forehead with the back of his hand. "Cooler. That was good. You hungry?" "I don't remember how hungry feels anymore." The words hit Jonas harder than any bullet. He thought about his own childhood, about never missing a meal, about his mother's kitchen always smelling like fresh bread, and his father's table always laden with enough food for family and strangers alike. This child had forgotten what hunger felt like because she'd been hungry for so long that emptiness had become normal. "Well, we're going to remind you," Jonas said gruffly. "Clara makes biscuits that could make a dead man sit up and ask for seconds. You just rest here, and I'll have her bring you a plate." But Grace's hand shot out, catching his sleeve. "Don't leave me alone, please, even for a minute." Jonas saw the naked fear in her eyes and nodded. "All right, then you come with me to the kitchen. Can you walk?" Grace slid out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She swayed, and Jonas caught her, shocked again by how light she was. He lifted her easily, settling her against his hip the way he'd seen fathers carry their children in town, and something in his chest cracked open a little wider. In the kitchen, Clara was already awake, stoking the stove and setting out flour and lard. She looked up as Jonas entered with Grace, and her expression softened. "Good morning, sweetheart. You look better than you did last night." "Miss Clara makes the best biscuits in the territory," Jonas said, settling Grace in a chair. "Emily used to say she learned from the best teacher." "Our mother," Clara said, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. "She used to say that a good biscuit could solve most of life's problems, and a bad biscuit could cause them." Grace watched with wide eyes as Clara worked. "Mama tried to teach me to cook, but we didn't have much flour. Mostly we ate whatever the tavern cook would give us, leftover stew, stale bread. Sometimes nothing." Clara's hand stilled for just a moment, then resumed their rhythm. "Well, those days are over. From now on, you eat 3 meals a day, proper portions, and enough to make up for lost time." As Clara cooked, Jonas kept watch through the kitchen window. The valley was still quiet, the morning mist clinging to the low places, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Garrett wouldn't wait long to make his next move. The question was what that move would be. The answer came an hour later. They were finishing breakfast. Grace had managed half a biscuit and some scrambled eggs, more food than she'd probably eaten in days, when Jonas heard horses approaching. 2 riders, moving at a steady pace. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Clara, take Grace to the bedroom. Lock the door and don't come out until I tell you." Clara didn't argue. She scooped Grace up and disappeared down the hall. Jonas heard the door close, the lock slide home. Good. Whatever was coming, Grace would be protected. He moved to the front window and recognized the first rider immediately. Sheriff Blackwood, his face grim even at a distance. The second rider was younger, wearing a deputy's badge that caught the morning light. Jonas didn't recognize him, which meant he was new, which meant Garrett might have planted him. Jonas opened the door but kept the rifle visible. "Roy, wasn't expecting you this early." Blackwood dismounted, his movements careful, telegraphing that he wasn't a threat. Jonas, this is Deputy Frank Moss. He transferred in from Red River 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Right around the time Garrett would have been consolidating his position, making sure he had people in place. Jonas studied the deputy, noting the nervous way his hand stayed near his gun, the way his eyes kept darting to the rifle Jonas held. "Deputy," Jonas acknowledged, "what brings you out here?" "Official business," Blackwood said, and his tone told Jonas everything. "Jonas, I need to see Grace. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" Blackwood glanced at Deputy Moss, then back at Jonas. "The kind that needs to be discussed inside. Can we come in?" Jonas stepped back, keeping the rifle ready. As they entered, he noticed how Moss's eyes cataloged everything, the layout of the house, the windows, the doors. The kid was either very observant or very well trained. Neither option was comforting. "Clara!" Jonas called. "It's safe. Sheriff Blackwood's here." The bedroom door opened and Clara emerged. Grace clutched against her side. The girl's eyes went wide when she saw the deputy, and she made a small sound of distress. "That's him," Grace whispered. "The tall man, the one who took me from Mama." Everything happened at once. Jonas swung the rifle toward Moss. The deputy's hand flew to his gun. Blackwood stepped between them, hands raised. "Whoa! Everyone hold on!" "She just identified him as the man who kidnapped her," Jonas said, his voice deadly calm. "Give me one good reason not to put a bullet through him right now." "Because I didn't." Moss looked genuinely panicked, which was either great acting or honest confusion. "I've never seen this child before in my life." "Grace," Jonas said, not taking his eyes off Moss. "You're sure?" Grace was shaking against Clara, but she leaned forward, studying Moss more carefully. Then her face crumpled. No, I'm sorry. He's tall and thin, but his face is different. The eyes are wrong. I'm sorry, I thought—" "It's all right, sweetheart." Jonas lowered the rifle slightly but didn't relax. "Roy, explain. Now." Blackwood let out a long breath. "Deputy Moss came to me last night with information. Frank, tell them what you told me." Moss still looked shaken, but he nodded. "I was hired 3 weeks ago by County Registrar Langford. He said the sheriff's office needed extra help. Said the county was approving the funding. Everything seemed legitimate. I had letters of recommendation, transfer papers, the works. But yesterday, after Sheriff Blackwood started asking questions about Langford, I started putting things together that didn't sit right." "What things?" Jonas demanded. "Small stuff at first. Langford giving me specific patrol routes that just happened to keep me away from certain areas of town at certain times. Him asking questions about ranch holdings in the valley, about who owned what, about property lines and deeds. Then last night, he called me to his office and—" Moss swallowed hard. "He offered me $500 to help him remove a child from your custody, Mr. Rourke. Said it was legal, said he had court orders, but the way he talked about it, it felt wrong." "So you went to Blackwood instead," Jonas said. "I'm a lawman, not a kidnapper. I don't care how legal the paperwork looks. Something about Langford sets my teeth on edge. And when the sheriff told me what you suspected about Garrett and the revenge plot—" Moss met Jonas's eyes. "My father rode with the Rangers during the war. He knew Captain Morrison. Knew you too, Mr. Rourke. Said you were one of the good ones. So if you say Langford is dirty, that's good enough for me." Jonas studied the young deputy for a long moment, then lowered the rifle completely. "All right. I believe you. Grace, sweetheart, I'm sorry you got scared. Deputy Moss isn't the man who hurt you." Grace nodded, still pressed against Clara, but some of the terror had left her eyes. Blackwood moved to the table and pulled out a thick envelope. "Jonas, this came in on the morning train. It's from the county court. Langford filed an emergency custody order yesterday evening, claiming Grace is in immediate danger in your care. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow? That's not enough time to, I know, it's a railroad job, no pun intended. He's got Judge Morrison presiding." Jonas felt his stomach drop. "Morrison? Roy, Morrison hates me, has ever since I testified against his cousin for cattle theft." "I know, which is why Garrett chose him." Blackwood's face was grave. "Jonas, I spent all night digging into Langford's background. His credentials are perfect. Too perfect. Every reference checks out, every document is flawless. But I sent a telegram to the Texas Rangers asking about Victor Garrett. Got a reply an hour ago. He pulled another paper from his pocket. Jonas took it, his hand steady despite the dread building in his gut. The telegram was short. Victor Garrett presumed dead. Stop, last seen, 1869 Texas. Border. Stop, wanted connection. Multiple murders, stop. Consider extremely dangerous, stop, exercise caution, stop. Presumed dead, Jonas read aloud. Perfect cover for building a new identity. That's what I thought. I also got responses from 3 other towns where similar cases occurred in the last year. Women dying of sudden illness, their children disappearing shortly after. In each case, a county official swooped in to help with the estate, and the children were never seen again. Clara gasped. He's been doing this to other families? Looks like it, but I can't prove the connection. The official in one town was named Sutton, in another, Barnes. Different names, different faces according to descriptions, but the pattern is the same. Wealthy widows or single mothers, sudden death, missing children, land quietly transferred to shell companies. It's not just about revenge, Jonas said slowly. He's using the revenge as cover for a larger operation, stealing land, eliminating witnesses, building wealth and power. That's my theory. But Jonas, here's the problem. I can't prove any of this in court by tomorrow. Judge Morrison will look at Langford's credentials, look at you as a bachelor rancher with no legal claim to Grace, and rule in the county's favor. Once Langford has custody, Grace disappears just like the others, Jonas finished. And I watch it happen, helpless, which satisfies Garrett's revenge while also eliminating a witness to his crimes. Exactly. Blackwood leaned forward. Which is why we need to change the game. We need to make it so Langford can't take Grace legally. How? By proving she's your legal family before the hearing. Jonas, if you can document that Grace is Emily's niece, that Margaret specifically sent her to you as guardian, then Langford's custody claim falls apart. He'd have no legal standing to take her. Jonas thought about the burned letter, the stolen documents, every piece of evidence Margaret had tried to preserve. All the proof was destroyed. Garrett made sure of it. Not all of it, Clara said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing very straight, her face pale but determined. When Emily and Margaret were girls, our mother had them photographed together. It was expensive, but Mother insisted. She said family should be preserved in silver as well as memory. I have that photograph in my house. Emily and Margaret, probably around Grace's age, standing in front of the church. Margaret would have been 7, Emily 12. A photograph proves they were sisters, Jonas said, but it doesn't prove Grace is Margaret's daughter. No, but it's a start. And there's something else. Clara moved closer to Grace, gently turning the child's face toward the light. Look at her profile. Really look. Jonas did, and suddenly he saw it. The shape of Grace's nose, the set of her jaw, the way her eyebrows arched. It was Emily's face, softened by childhood, but unmistakable. She looks like Emily, he breathed. More than that. She looks exactly like Emily did at this age. I have other photographs, Jonas, pictures of Emily as a child. If we put them side by side with Grace, anyone could see the family resemblance. Add that to Margaret's photograph, to Emily's documented maiden name, to Grace knowing the family lullaby. Clara's eyes were fierce. We can build a circumstantial case strong enough that even Judge Morrison would have to acknowledge it. It might work, Blackwood said. It's not perfect, but combined with Grace's testimony about what happened to her mother, about Langford's involvement, we might have enough to at least delay the custody order until a proper investigation can be conducted. But that means putting Grace on the stand, Jonas said. Making her relive everything. Roy, she's 7 years old and traumatized. I won't do that to her. You might not have a choice. Blackwood's voice was gentle but firm. Grace is the only witness to Margaret's murder, to Garrett's confession. Without her testimony, we have nothing but theories and coincidences. Jonas looked at Grace, who'd been listening to everything with wide, serious eyes. Sweetheart, do you understand what we're talking about? If we go to court tomorrow, you'd have to tell the judge everything that happened, about your mama dying, about the man who took you, about being in the freight car. It would be scary, and you'd have to be very brave. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice small but steady. Will it stop him? If I tell the judge everything, will it stop the man with the wrong smile from hurting other children? Jonas felt something crack in his chest. Yes, I think it would. Then I'll do it. Mama said being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Grace looked at Jonas with eyes too old for her years. And the right thing is stopping him. That's settled then, Clara said briskly, though her voice trembled. I'll go into town this morning, get the photographs, and bring them back here. Jonas, you stay with Grace and prepare her for tomorrow. Sheriff, you keep digging. There has to be more evidence we can use. And I'll stay here, Deputy Moss offered. Extra protection, in case Langford tries something before the hearing. Jonas wanted to refuse. He didn't know this kid, didn't trust him fully despite his story. But the truth was, they needed all the help they could get. All right, but Moss, understand something. If you're playing us, if you're working for Garrett, and this is all some elaborate setup, I will find out. And when I do, you'll kill me, Moss finished. I know, but Mr. Rourke, I'm not playing you. My father taught me that a man's worth is measured by who he protects and how hard he fights for them. You're fighting for a child who has no one else. That makes you worth following. Jonas studied him a moment longer, then nodded. Fair enough. Clara, take my horse. He's faster than the wagon. And Clara? He waited until she met his eyes. Be careful. If Garrett suspects what we're planning, he might try to stop you. Let him try, Clara said grimly. I've got 50 years of righteous anger built up, and I'm ready to aim it at someone who deserves it. She left within the hour, armed with one of Jonas's pistols and strict instructions to stay visible, stay in crowds, and trust no one. Jonas watched her ride down the valley, a knot of worry in his gut. They were making moves now, showing their hand, and Garrett would respond. The question was how. The answer came at noon. Jonas was helping Grace practice her testimony, gently, carefully, making sure she understood she could stop any time it became too much. When Deputy Moss called from the front porch, "Rider coming! Fast!" Jonas grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. A single horseman was racing up the valley road, his mount lathered and blowing. As he got closer, Jonas recognized Pete Branson from the depot. Something was wrong. Jonas met Pete at the door. The old man was pale and shaking, and it took him 3 tries to get words out. Jonas, you need Clara? What about Clara? Pete, what happened? She went to her house for the photographs, like she said, but when she came out, Pete's voice broke. Langford was waiting. Had 2 men with him. They grabbed her, Jonas. Right there on Main Street, in front of God and everyone. Said she was interfering in county business. Said she was harboring stolen property. Stolen property? Jonas felt rage building in his chest. He means Grace. I tried to stop them, but they had guns and badges. County marshal badges, not local. They took Clara to the county courthouse in Red River. Said she's being held for obstruction and conspiracy. Pete looked at Jonas with desperate eyes. They're using her as bait. Everyone knows it. Langford's daring you to come get her. Jonas stood frozen, his mind racing. It was perfect. Diabolical, but perfect. Garrett had Clara, which meant Jonas had a choice. Stay and protect Grace or go rescue Clara. Either way, Garrett won. If Jonas stayed, Clara would suffer for his choice. If Jonas left, Grace would be vulnerable. It's a trap, Blackwood said from behind him. Come inside when he heard Pete's horse. He's trying to separate you from Grace. I know. Jonas looked at Grace, who'd gone white with fear. But I can't just abandon Clara. She's family too. You can't go after her alone either. That's suicide. Then what do you suggest? Before Blackwood could answer, Deputy Moss spoke up. I'll go. I'm still officially on county business. I can access the courthouse, talk to the marshals, maybe find out exactly where they're holding Mrs. Whitwell. If I can create a distraction, give you an opening. You'd be risking your career, Jonas said. Maybe your life. Seems like the right thing to do. Moss checked his guns. Besides, I signed on to be a lawman, not a kidnapper's accomplice. If Langford's using the system to hurt innocents, then the system needs good men willing to fight back from the inside. Jonas wanted to argue, but Moss was right. They needed someone on the inside, someone Garrett wouldn't immediately suspect. All right. But Moss, if this goes wrong, if they catch you helping us, then I'll deal with it. But Mr. Rourke, you need to promise me something. Moss looked at Grace. You keep that child safe, whatever it takes. Because men like Garrett, they don't just hurt one child. They hurt every child they touch, and they never stop unless someone makes them. I promise, Jonas said. As Moss rode out, Jonas turned to Blackwood. Roy, I need you to be honest with me. What are our chances tomorrow in court? Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. Without Clara's testimony and the photographs, without solid proof of the connection between Grace and Margaret, slim to none. Judge Morrison will rule in Langford's favor and will have 48 hours before the custody transfer is enforced. 48 hours to do what? Run? Hide? Live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? Or 48 hours to find the evidence that brings Garrett down permanently? Blackwood moved closer, lowering his voice so Grace wouldn't hear. Jonas, I think the evidence exists. I think Margaret kept records, kept proof of what Garrett was doing. And I think that's why he had to kill her, not just for revenge, but because she knew too much. But if she kept records, where are they? Garrett took everything from her room in Kansas City. Everything obvious, maybe. But think about it. Margaret was Emily's sister. She would have known how thorough Emily was, how she always kept backups, how she never trusted important things to just one location. Blackwood pulled out a crumpled letter. I found this in the county archives this morning. It's from 3 months ago, postmarked Kansas City, addressed to Emily at your ranch. Jonas took the letter, his hands starting to shake. But Emily's been dead for years. Exactly, which means whoever mailed this didn't know Emily was dead. Jonas, I think this is from Margaret. I think she was trying to reach her sister, trying to warn her, trying to send her something. The postmaster says the letter was returned as undeliverable, but he kept it because it had official county business listed as the return address, which was odd, so he filed it away and forgot about it. Jonas turned the envelope over. It was thick, bulky, like something more than paper was inside. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. The letter was in a woman's handwriting, hurried but legible. Emily, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. The man I was seeing, the one you warned me about, he's not who he said he was. His name is Victor Garrett, and he's been using me to get to Jonas. He knows about Jonas killing his brother. He's been planning revenge for years. I was a fool to trust him, and now I've put myself and Grace in danger. I'm sending this key to you because you're the only one I can trust. It opens a box at the Kansas City Bank, account number 3471. Inside you'll find everything. Evidence of Garrett's crimes, names of people he's killed, proof of his land schemes. If anything happens to me, please protect my daughter. Tell Jonas I'm sorry for everything. Tell him to use what's in that box to destroy Garrett before he destroys everyone we love. Your sister, Margaret. Jonas read the letter 3 times, his mind reeling. Margaret had known, had documented everything. And she'd tried to warn Emily, not knowing Emily was already dead, possibly by the same hand that would kill Margaret months later. The box, Jonas said. We need to get to Kansas City. That's a 3-day ride, Blackwood pointed out. The hearing is tomorrow. Even if you left now, I'm not leaving Grace. Then let me go. I'll ride tonight, push hard, get there by tomorrow evening. I'll wire the bank, have them open the box with a court order if necessary. Whatever's in there, Jonas, it might be enough to stop Garrett permanently. And if you don't make it back in time, Blackwood met his eyes squarely, then you do what you have to do to protect that child. Even if it means running, even if it means leaving everything behind, because Jonas, if Garrett gets his hands on Grace, she won't survive it. He's already killed 2 women that we know of. He won't hesitate to kill a child. Jonas looked at Grace, who'd been sitting quietly through all of this, taking in information no child should have to process. She met his gaze steadily, and he saw something in her eyes that reminded him achingly of Emily, a core of steel wrapped in gentleness. I won't run, Grace said quietly. Mama didn't run. Aunt Emily didn't run. I won't either. Grace, Mr. Jonas, The man with the wrong smile wants me to be scared, wants me to hide, wants everyone to hide. But Mama said the only way to stop bad men is to stand up to them, even when you're small and they're big, even when you're scared. Grace's chin lifted. I'm scared, but I'm going to stand up anyway. Jonas felt pride and heartbreak war in his chest. This child, who'd been starved and traumatized and nearly killed, still had more courage than most men he'd known. All right, he said. Then we stand together. Roy, you ride for Kansas City. Pete, I need you to spread the word in town, quietly, that tomorrow's hearing isn't what it seems. Make sure people know that Garrett is using the law to cover murder. Deputy Moss will work the Red River angle, try to get Clara free. And Grace and I— He paused, looking at the girl. Grace and I will prepare for tomorrow. Whatever happens, we face it head on. As the men scattered to their tasks, Jonas knelt beside Grace. Are you sure about this? Because if you want to change your mind, if you want me to take you somewhere safe and quiet, where you can just be a child for a while. I stopped being just a child when Mama died, Grace interrupted. Now I'm a child who has to help stop a bad man. And I can do that. I can be brave like Mama and Aunt Emily. She reached out and put her small hand on Jonas's cheek. You're scared too. I can feel it. But you're being brave anyway. That's what grown-ups do for children, isn't it? You're scared, but you protect us anyway. Jonas pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Yeah, sweetheart. That's exactly what we do. They spent the afternoon preparing. Jonas taught Grace what to expect in court, how to speak clearly, how to answer only what was asked. Grace practiced her testimony, her voice getting stronger with each repetition. And in between, Jonas caught himself noticing small things. The way Grace hummed Emily's lullaby when she was nervous, the way she organized the papers on the table just like Emily used to, the way her laugh, when it came, sounded like morning light after a long night. She was family. Blood and bone, yes, but more than that. She was choice and promise, and the future Emily had wanted but never got to have. As evening fell, Grace looked up from her dinner. She'd managed 3 whole biscuits and a bowl of stew, more food than her stomach probably knew what to do with, and asked the question Jonas had been dreading. Mr. Jonas, what if we lose tomorrow? What if the judge says I have to go with Mr. Langford? Jonas set down his fork and met her eyes. He'd promised himself he wouldn't lie to this child, wouldn't give her false hope just to make her feel better. She deserved better than that. Then we'll have to make a hard choice, he said honestly. We could run, head north to Montana or west to California, somewhere Garrett can't reach us. We'd have to leave everything behind, live under different names, always looking over our shoulders, or— He paused. Or we could fight. Really fight, not just in court. The way I used to fight, before I became civilized. The way you fought the men who hurt people? Grace asked. The way you stopped the bad gang? Yes, that way. But Grace, you need to understand, if we go that route, there's no going back. I'd be breaking the law to uphold what's right. I might end up in prison or worse, and you'd be caught in the middle of it all. Grace was quiet for a long time, her eyes distant. Then she asked, what would Aunt Emily want you to do? The question hit Jonas like a physical blow. What would Emily want? Emily, who'd believed in law and order and doing things the right way. Emily, who'd talked him down from vigilante justice more than once, who'd made him promise to trust the system even when the system failed. But Emily had also made him promise to protect Margaret if she ever needed help. And that promise extended to Grace now. I think, Jonas said slowly, Emily would want me to protect you, however I had to, whatever it cost. Grace nodded, satisfied. Then that's what we'll do. We'll go to court tomorrow and try to win the right way. But if the judge is wrong, if he gives me to the bad man— She looked at Jonas with fierce determination. Then you fight like you used to, and I'll help however I can. You're 7 years old. You shouldn't have to help fight battles. But I'm already in this battle. The bad man made me part of it when he hurt Mama, so I might as well help win it. Grace reached across the table and took Jonas's hand. We're family now, right? And families fight for each other. Yes, Jonas said, his throat tight. We're family. and I will fight for you until my last breath." That night, Jonas lay in his bedroll by the fireplace. He'd given Grace the bedroom and refused to sleep more than 10 feet from her door. The house was quiet except for the settling sounds of wood and wind. But Jonas's mind wouldn't settle. It kept circling back to tomorrow, to the courthouse, to standing before Judge Morrison and trying to convince a man who hated him that Grace belonged here, not in Garrett's clutches. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps. Grace appeared in the doorway, clutching one of Emily's old quilts around her shoulders. "Can't sleep?" Jonas asked quietly. "I keep seeing Mama's face, the way she looked right before." Grace's voice trembled. "Mr. Jonas, do you think she knew? That she was dying, I mean. Do you think she was scared?" Jonas sat up and patted the space beside him. Grace curled up against his side, small and warm and heartbreakingly fragile. "I think she knew," Jonas said honestly, "and I think she was terrified, not for herself, but for you. That's what parents do. We're not scared of dying. We're scared of leaving our children alone and unprotected. But you're not my parent." "No, but I'm your guardian, and that means I carry the same fear, the same responsibility." Jonas pulled the quilt tighter around them both. "Grace, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to remember something. Your mama loved you so much that she used her last strength to save you. She sent you to me because she believed I could keep you safe, and I'm going to honor that belief, that trust. I will not let you down." Grace was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I think Mama sent me to you for another reason too." "What reason?" "Because you were sad and alone, and she thought maybe we could save each other." Grace looked up at him with eyes that saw too much. "That's what Aunt Emily would have wanted, isn't it? For you to have someone to take care of again, someone to love." Jonas felt tears burn behind his eyes. Out of the mouths of babes came truths that adults spent lifetimes avoiding. "Maybe you're right," he said roughly. "Maybe your mama was smarter than I gave her credit for." They sat together in the firelight, guardian and child, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of other people's hatred. And Jonas made a silent vow to Emily, to Margaret, to whatever powers governed the universe. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, he would give everything he had to keep this child safe. And if the system failed them, if Judge Morrison ruled against them, then Jonas would become again what he'd been in his ranger days, a man who did what needed doing, regardless of the cost. Because Grace was right. They were family now, and family was worth any price, any sacrifice, any sin. Even if it meant going to war with a ghost who'd waited 16 years for revenge, even if it meant becoming a ghost himself. Morning came too fast and too slow all at once. Jonas had managed maybe 2 hours of sleep before the pre-dawn light started creeping through the windows, gray and reluctant. Grace had fallen asleep against his shoulder sometime after 1, and he'd carried her back to bed without waking her. Now he stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the valley for any sign of movement. The hearing was at 2 o'clock. It was barely 6 now, which meant 8 hours of waiting, 8 hours of Grace's growing anxiety, 8 hours for Garrett to make another move. Jonas had checked his guns 3 times already, verified the ammunition, made sure every weapon in the house was loaded and within reach. He'd fought in a war, tracked killers through hostile territory, faced down men who wanted him dead. But standing here waiting to walk into a courtroom felt more dangerous than all of that combined. Because in a courtroom, he couldn't use his guns, couldn't rely on his instincts, couldn't protect Grace the way he knew how. He'd have to trust the system, trust the law, trust a judge who despised him to make the right choice. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor." Jonas turned to find Grace standing in the doorway, still in the nightdress Clara had found for her. Her dark hair was a tangle, and her eyes carried shadows that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "Couldn't rest either?" Jonas asked. "I kept having the dream again. The one where the man with the wrong smile takes me away and you can't follow because there are chains holding you down. And you're screaming my name, but I keep getting further and further away until I can't hear you anymore." Grace wrapped her arms around herself. "Do you think dreams know things? Like what's going to happen?" "I think dreams are just our fears playing dress-up," Jonas said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Come here. Let's get you fed before we have to get ready." As Jonas cooked breakfast, eggs and bacon, more food than either of them could probably eat, but he needed the activity. Grace sat at the table arranging and rearranging the salt and pepper shakers. It was something Emily used to do when she was nervous, and seeing Grace do it now made Jonas's chest ache. "Mr. Jonas, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "If the judge says I have to go with Mr. Langford, will you really fight, the way you said last night, even if it means breaking the law?" Jonas set down the spatula and turned to face her fully. "Yes." "Even if you go to jail?" "Even then." "Even if people say you're bad and wrong?" "Grace, listen to me." Jonas knelt beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "There's law, and then there's justice. Most of the time they're the same thing. But sometimes, not often, but sometimes, they're not. When that happens, when the law is being used to hurt innocent people instead of protect them, then good men have to decide what matters more, following rules or doing what's right." He took her small hands in his. "I've lived by the law most of my life, but I've also broken it when breaking it was the only way to save lives, and I won't apologize for that. Mama said the same thing once. She said sometimes being good means being bad in the eyes of bad people." Grace's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She said that's why she couldn't go to the police about Mr. Langford, even when she figured out who he really was, because he'd made himself part of the police, part of the law, and nobody believes someone like her over someone like him. Your mama was right, and she was also brave for recognizing that." Jonas squeezed Grace's hands gently. "But you and I have something your mama didn't have. We have people willing to help us. Sheriff Blackwood, Deputy Moss, even Pete Branson. We're not alone in this fight." "But Miss Clara is. She's alone in that place with those men." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "What if they hurt her because of me? What if—" "Hey, no." Jonas pulled Grace into a hug. "Clara knew what she was risking when she chose to help us. She's a grown woman who made her own choice. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. You're a child who deserves to be protected, and anyone who hurts you or the people protecting you, that's on them, not you." Grace cried against his shoulder, her small body shaking with guilt and fear and exhaustion. Jonas held her and wished he could take all of it away, wished he could rewrite the last few months so Margaret never met Victor Garrett, so Emily never died, so this child never had to learn that the world could be cruel and adults could be monsters. But he couldn't rewrite the past. He could only fight for the future, and that fight started in 6 hours. By noon, Jonas had Grace dressed in a simple blue dress that had belonged to Emily as a child. Clara had brought it to the ranch weeks ago, saying Jonas should have something of Emily's that wasn't just memory. The dress was a little big, but it made Grace look even more like Emily's photographs, which was exactly what they needed. Jonas himself wore his Sunday suit, the one he'd bought for his wedding and hadn't touched since Emily's funeral. It smelled like cedar and mothballs and broken promises. But it made him look respectable, civilized, like a man who could be trusted with a child's welfare instead of a former ranger who knew 50 ways to kill a man. At 1 o'clock, a wagon pulled up outside. Pete Branson was driving, and beside him sat an older woman Jonas recognized as Mrs. Henshaw, who ran the boarding house in town. Behind them, in the wagon bed, sat 6 more townspeople, all of them looking grim and determined. "What's this?" Jonas asked as he stepped onto the porch, Grace's hand tight in his. "This is your character witnesses," Pete announced. "Mrs. Henshaw here is ready to testify that you're a upstanding citizen who paid for 3 months of her late husband's medical care without being asked. Tom Wheeler's going to talk about how you saved his son from drowning. Sarah Mitchell's going to mention that you tracked down the men who stole her horses and returned them without taking the reward, and so on." Jonas felt his throat tighten. "You didn't have to do this." "The hell we didn't," Mrs. Henshaw said sharply. She was 70, if she was a day, with steel gray hair and a spine that made fence posts look flexible. "Victor Langford has been sniffing around town for 3 months, asking questions, making judgments, acting like he owns the place. Most folks were too polite to say anything, but I've lived too long to be polite to snakes. When Pete told us what was really happening, what Langford really is," she shook her head. "No, sir, we're not letting some carpetbagging murderer steal a child under color of law. Not in our town." Grace pressed closer to Jonas's side, and he felt her trembling. These people were risking Garrett's anger to help them. If things went wrong, if Garrett won, he might retaliate against any of them. I can't ask you to put yourselves in danger, Jonas started. Good thing you're not asking then, Tom Wheeler interrupted. He was a big man, a blacksmith with hands like hams and a heart bigger than his forge. We're volunteering. Now stop arguing and let's get to that courthouse before the judge starts without us. The ride to Red River took an hour. Grace sat between Jonas and Pete, her hand never leaving Jonas's arm. The other townspeople followed in 2 more wagons, talking quietly among themselves. Jonas caught fragments of their conversation. Strategies for testimony, details to emphasize, ways to paint him as a suitable guardian. They were preparing like soldiers before battle, and Jonas felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly unmanned him. Red River was bigger than Salvation Creek, with a proper courthouse made of stone instead of wood. Jonas had been here twice before, once for his wedding license, once to testify in the cattle theft case that had made Judge Morrison hate him. The building loomed over the town square like a gray promise of justice, though Jonas knew promises could be broken as easily as bones. They arrived at 1:45. The courthouse steps were already crowded with people, some townspeople from Red River, some official-looking men in county uniforms, some faces Jonas didn't recognize. And standing at the top of the steps, greeting people like he was hosting a social event, was Victor Langford. He looked exactly as he had 2 days ago. Expensive suit, calculating smile, eyes that held all the warmth of a snake. When he saw Jonas and Grace, his smile widened. "Mr. Rourke, how good of you to come. I was worried you might try to run." Langford's gaze dropped to Grace, and Jonas saw something flicker in those cold eyes. Not quite hate, not quite triumph. Something worse. Ownership. "And you brought the child. Excellent. This should all proceed quite smoothly." Jonas wanted to hit him, wanted to wipe that smug expression off his face and watch him fall, but Grace's hand tightened on his, and he forced himself to stay calm. "We're here for justice," Jonas said evenly. "Not your version of it, the real thing." "Justice is what the court decides, Mr. Rourke, and the court has been quite clear about the impropriety of an unmarried man raising a young girl without proper documentation or oversight." Langford gestured toward the courthouse doors. "But please, do make your case. I'm sure Judge Morrison will give you every consideration you deserve." The way he said it made Jonas's blood run cold. Garrett had already won. He knew it, and he wanted Jonas to know it too. This wasn't a hearing, it was a formality before the execution. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Jonas expected, but no less intimidating. Oak panels on the walls, a raised bench for the judge, rows of seats for spectators. Jonas spotted Clara immediately. She was sitting in the front row, flanked by 2 county marshals. Her face was pale and drawn, and when she saw Grace, tears started streaming down her cheeks. Grace started toward her, but Jonas held her back. "Not yet, sweetheart. We have to wait." "But she's crying. She needs—" "I know, but if we approach her now, they might separate you. We have to play by their rules until we can't anymore." Grace nodded, though her face crumpled with the effort of not running to Clara. They took seats on the other side of the courtroom, Jonas keeping Grace close. The townspeople from Salvation Creek filled in behind them, a wall of solidarity. On the opposite side, Langford sat alone, perfectly relaxed, occasionally making notes on a leather portfolio. At precisely 2 o'clock, a door behind the bench opened and Judge Morrison entered. He was 60, heavy-set, with white hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime around the Civil War. His eyes swept the courtroom, lingered on Jonas with obvious distaste, then settled on Grace with something that might have been pity. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "All rise." They rose. The judge sat. The machinery of law began to grind. "We are here," Judge Morrison began, "to determine the matter of guardianship for one Grace Bennett, minor child, currently in the custody of Mr. Jonas Rourke. County Registrar Langford has filed a petition to remove the child from Mr. Rourke's custody and place her in county care pending identification of proper family. Mr. Langford, you may present your case." Langford stood with practiced ease. "Thank you, Your Honor. The facts are quite simple. 3 days ago, a child was discovered in a freight car at the Salvation Creek Depot. She was alone, malnourished, and carrying no identification beyond a cryptic note. Mr. Rourke, acting on nothing more than emotional impulse, removed this child from the scene, and took her to his ranch without notifying proper authorities or following any legal protocol for handling abandoned minors. That's not true, Grace whispered, but Jonas squeezed her hand gently. Not yet, he murmured. Langford continued. While Mr. Rourke's heroism in rescuing the child is commendable, his subsequent actions raise serious concerns. He has no blood relation to this child. He has no documentation proving any legal right to her custody, and he has resisted all attempts by county officials to ensure the child's welfare according to established law. Langford paused for effect. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have evidence that Mr. Rourke has a history of violence and disregard for legal process. He is, by his own admission, a former member of Morrison's Rangers, a paramilitary group known for operating outside normal law enforcement boundaries. Judge Morrison's face hardened. Jonas knew what was coming. The Rangers were sanctioned by the territorial government, Jonas said, unable to stay silent. Mr. Rourke, you will have your turn to speak, the judge said sharply. Continue, Mr. Langford. Thank you, Your Honor. My concern is simple. This child deserves stability, proper care, and a legal guardian who respects the law. Mr. Rourke, whatever his personal virtues, cannot provide that. I am therefore requesting immediate custody transfer to county care, where the child will be properly housed, educated, and eventually placed with a suitable family. Langford sat down, the picture of reasonable authority. Jonas felt Grace trembling beside him and knew it was taking all her courage not to cry out. He kept his hand steady on hers, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. Mr. Rourke, Judge Morrison said, do you have representation? No, Your Honor, just the truth. The truth is not always sufficient in a court of law, but very well, present your case. Jonas stood, acutely aware of every eye in the room on him. He'd faced down killers with less anxiety than he felt now. Your Honor, everything Mr. Langford said is technically accurate. I did take Grace from that freight car without proper procedure. I did bring her to my ranch. I did resist county officials. Jonas paused. But what he's not telling you is why. That freight car door was sealed shut, nailed from the outside. Grace was left in there to die. Someone tried to murder this child, and when I found her, my first thought wasn't about paperwork. It was about saving her life. Laudable, but irrelevant to the question of legal custody, Morrison said. It's completely relevant, Your Honor, because the person who tried to kill Grace is in this room right now. Jonas pointed directly at Langford. That man is not Victor Langford. He's Victor Garrett, brother of Daniel Garrett, the outlaw I helped bring to justice 16 years ago. He's been planning revenge ever since, and Grace is his weapon of choice. The courtroom erupted. Langford was on his feet, his face a mask of outraged innocence. Your Honor, this is absurd. Mr. Rourke is clearly unstable. Sit down, both of you. Morrison's gavel slammed like a gunshot. Mr. Rourke, those are serious accusations. I assume you have evidence? Grace is my evidence. She witnessed her mother's murder by Garrett's accomplice. She heard Garrett himself confess to the plan. Grace, sweetheart, stand up. Tell the judge what you told me. Grace stood on shaky legs, her voice barely audible. It's true. The man with the wrong smile, that's him. He came after Mama died. He said Mr. Jonas took everything from him, and now he was taking everything from Mr. Jonas. He said he wanted to watch Mr. Jonas lose everyone he loved. Your Honor, Langford said smoothly, this is the testimony of a traumatized 7-year-old who's been coached by Mr. Rourke. She's confused, frightened, and I'm not confused, Grace's voice suddenly rang out clear and strong. My mama died coughing blood because you poisoned her. You killed her just like you killed Aunt Emily. And now you want to take me away so you can kill me too and make Mr. Jonas watch. The courtroom went dead silent. Jonas saw Clara's face crumple, saw the townspeople behind him lean forward with shock, saw the judge's expression shift from irritation to something more complex. Aunt Emily? Morrison repeated. Child, what is your full name? Grace Bennett. My mama was Margaret Whitwell Bennett. Aunt Emily was Emily Whitwell Rourke. She married Mr. Jonas, and Mama said if anything bad happened, I should go to him because he promised to take care of family. Morrison looked at Clara. Mrs. Whitwell, can you verify this? Clara stood, wiping her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Margaret was my younger sister. I have photographs proving the family connection, and Grace looks exactly like Emily did at that age. The resemblance is unmistakable. Then why? Morrison asked, his voice heavy with suspicion. Are we only learning this now? Why wasn't this information presented immediately? Because someone destroyed all of Margaret's documents, Jonas said. Because Garrett, Langford, whatever you want to call him, has spent months planning this. He killed Margaret, he tried to kill Grace, and now he's using the legal system to finish the job. These are serious accusations, Mr. Rourke, but where is your proof? Beyond the word of a child and your own paranoia? Jonas felt desperation claw at him. Where was Blackwood? Had he made it to Kansas City? Had he found Margaret's evidence? Before he could answer, the courtroom doors burst open. Deputy Moss stumbled in, his face bleeding, his uniform torn. Behind him, Sheriff Blackwood appeared, equally disheveled, but carrying a leather satchel. Your Honor, Blackwood gasped. I apologize for the interruption, but we have evidence. Critical evidence regarding this case. Morrison looked ready to explode. Sheriff Blackwood, this is highly irregular. So is attempted murder and fraud, Your Honor. I just spent the last 18 hours riding to Kansas City and back. I have documents from Margaret Bennett's safety deposit box. Documents that prove everything Mr. Rourke has been saying. Blackwood moved forward, pulling papers from the satchel. Signed confessions from victims of Victor Garrett's land schemes. Photographs of Garrett under various aliases. Bank records showing money transfers to shell companies. And a letter, written by Margaret Bennett 3 months ago, detailing how Victor Garrett poisoned her, threatened her daughter, and planned to use Grace to torture Jonas Rourke as revenge for killing his brother. Langford was on his feet, his composure finally cracking. Those documents are forgeries. Margaret Bennett was a known liar, and you just admitted you knew her, Jonas said softly. You just claimed to know her character, but Victor Langford, county registrar, should have no knowledge of a woman who died in Kansas City 3 months ago. Should he, Your Honor? Morrison's eyes narrowed. An excellent point, Mr. Langford, or whoever you are. I think you need to answer some questions, starting with... Langford moved fast, faster than a county bureaucrat should have been able to move. He grabbed Grace, yanking her away from Jonas with brutal efficiency. Before anyone could react, he had a knife at her throat. Nobody move! Langford's mask of civility was gone, replaced by the cold killer he'd always been beneath. I walk out of here with the girl, or she dies right here in front of all of you. Jonas gets to watch. That was always the plan. Jonas went very still, his hand hovering near his gun. But there were too many people, too much chaos. One wrong move and Grace would bleed out before he could stop it. Victor, Jonas said quietly, let her go. Your fight is with me, not her. My fight is with your happiness, Garrett snarled. My brother died alone in the dirt while you walked away to your perfect life with your perfect wife in your perfect house. I spent 16 years in hell building a new identity, planning my revenge. And when I finally tracked you down, when I saw you'd lost Emily, he laughed, a broken sound. I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe watching you grieve was sufficient revenge. But then I found out about Margaret, found out Emily had made you promise to protect her family. And I realized, why settle for past grief when I could create fresh pain? So you killed Margaret, Jonas said, keeping his voice level, keeping Garrett talking. You killed an innocent woman just to hurt me. Innocent. She was leverage, just like Emily was leverage, just like this little brat is leverage. Garrett pressed the knife harder against Grace's throat, and a thin line of blood appeared. Grace whimpered but didn't struggle. I made Emily sick slowly so you'd watch her die. I made Margaret sick slowly so she'd have time to send her daughter to you. And now I'm going to take Grace and make you watch as I destroy her piece by piece until there's nothing left but your guilt and my satisfaction. You're insane, Clara breathed. I'm patient, Garrett corrected. There's a difference. Now, everyone move aside. The girl and I are leaving. Jonas, you're going to watch us go, and you're going to do nothing. Because if you try to stop me, if anyone tries to stop me, I'll open her throat right here, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have saved her, but didn't. Jonas looked at Grace. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she was watching him, trusting him, believing he'd find a way. He thought about Emily, about the promises he'd made and broken, about 4 years of dying slowly, about 3 days of remembering what it felt like to live. Then he thought about what he'd told Grace. Sometimes being good means being bad in the eyes of bad people. "No," Jonas said. Garrett blinked. "What?" "I said no. You're not taking her. You're not leaving this courthouse. And you're sure as hell not walking away from this." Jonas took a step forward. "You spent 16 years planning revenge, Victor. I spent 3 days remembering who I used to be. Want to find out which one of us planned better? I'll kill her." "No, you won't. Because if you kill her now, your revenge is over. You need her alive to torture me. That's your weakness. You want me to suffer, which means she has to survive long enough for me to watch. You hesitate because killing her too quickly defeats your purpose." Jonas took another step. "But me? I don't hesitate. Never did." Jonas drew and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet took Garrett in the shoulder, the one holding the knife. The blade clattered to the floor. Grace dropped, and Jonas was there, scooping her up, shielding her with his body as the courtroom erupted into chaos. Garrett screamed, clutching his shoulder. "You bastard! You shot me in a courthouse." "Should have shot you 16 years ago," Jonas said coldly. "Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." Deputies swarmed Garrett, pinning him down as he thrashed and screamed threats. Judge Morrison was shouting for order. Clara was sobbing. And Grace was pressed against Jonas's chest, alive and bleeding, but alive, her small arms wrapped around his neck like she'd never let go. "I've got you," Jonas murmured into her hair. "I've got you, sweetheart. You're safe now. You're safe." "You shot him," Grace whispered, her voice filled with awe and shock. "You really shot him!" "I told you I'd fight for you. I keep my promises." Blackwood appeared beside them, his face grim but satisfied. "Jonas, that was the stupidest, most reckless, most perfect shot I've ever seen. You're either going to be arrested or celebrated, maybe both. Don't care which, long as Grace is safe." "Oh, she's safe. And Garrett's going to prison for the rest of his life. Maybe longer if we can prove he killed Emily." Blackwood pulled papers from his satchel. "Margaret's evidence is damning. Names, dates, methods. She documented everything from the first day she realized who Garrett really was. She knew she was dying, knew he was coming for Grace, and she made sure we'd have what we needed to stop him." Jonas looked at Grace, at this child who'd survived because her mother had been brave enough to fight back even in death. Margaret was remarkable. Yes, she was, and so is her daughter. Blackwood reached out and gently touched Grace's hair. "You did good, little one. You stood up when it mattered most." Grace lifted her face from Jonas's shoulder, looking around at the chaos of the courtroom. Garrett was being dragged away, still screaming about revenge and injustice. Clara had broken free from the marshals and was rushing toward them. Judge Morrison was staring at Jonas with an expression that mixed horror, respect, and resignation. "Mr. Rourke," Morrison called out, "we need to discuss your actions." "In a minute, Your Honor." Jonas set Grace down carefully, checking the cut on her neck. It was shallow, more scared than hurt. "Grace, I need you to go with Clara now. Can you do that for me?" "But I have to answer some questions about shooting a man in a courthouse. It's going to be boring legal stuff, and you've had enough of that for one day." Jonas managed a smile that felt like breaking glass. "Besides, I think Clara's earned some time with you." Clara reached them, pulling Grace into a fierce embrace. "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, my brave, brave girl." She looked at Jonas over Grace's head, her eyes swimming with tears. "Thank you. For everything." "Thank Emily," Jonas said. "She's the one who made the promise. I just kept it." As Clara led Grace away, Jonas turned to face Judge Morrison. The judge looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. "Mr. Rourke, you just discharged a firearm in my courtroom, shot a county official, and caused enough chaos to keep me in paperwork for a month." Morrison paused. "You also saved that child's life and exposed a murderer who's been operating under my nose for months. I'm going to have to think very carefully about how to proceed." "While you're thinking, Your Honor, you might want to read these." Blackwood handed over Margaret's documents. Everything you need to understand what really happened here. And if you're considering charging Jonas with anything, remember that he acted in defense of a child who was being held at knife point by a man who'd already confessed to multiple murders. Morrison took the documents, his expression unreadable. Everyone out. I need time to review this evidence and decide how to proceed. Court will reconvene in 1 hour. He looked at Jonas. Mr. Rourke, you're not under arrest, but I strongly suggest you don't leave the building. We have much to discuss. The courtroom cleared slowly, people talking in hushed voices, casting looks at Jonas that ranged from admiring to horrified. Pete Branson clapped him on the shoulder. Mrs. Henshaw told him he'd done exactly right. Tom Wheeler offered to testify that Garrett had clearly been a threat and Jonas had no choice, but Jonas barely heard any of it. He was watching Clara and Grace through the courthouse window, seeing them sit on a bench in the afternoon sun, seeing Grace lean against Clara like she'd finally found solid ground after weeks of quicksand. You did it, Blackwood said quietly. You saved her. We saved her, Jonas corrected. You, Clara, Moss, even those folks from Salvation Creek. This wasn't just me. No, but you're the one who pulled the trigger when it mattered. Blackwood studied him. How do you feel? Jonas thought about it. How did he feel? 4 days ago, he'd been sleepwalking through life, going through motions without meaning. 3 days ago, he'd found a dying child in a freight car and felt something inside him crack open. Now he'd killed, or at least wounded, the man who'd murdered Emily and Margaret, saved the child they'd both loved, and maybe, just maybe, found a reason to keep living. I feel, Jonas said slowly, like I just woke up from a very long nightmare. Good. Because the hard part's just beginning. What hard part? Garrett's caught. The truth is out. The hard part is raising a traumatized 7-year-old who's lost everything and everyone she knew. The hard part is teaching her that the world isn't always cruel, that people can be trusted, that family means safety instead of danger. Blackwood smiled. You signed up to be a guardian, Jonas. Now you have to figure out how to actually do it. Jonas looked out at Grace again. She was laughing at something Clara said, and the sound carried through the window like church bells, clear and pure and full of promise. I'll figure it out, Jonas said, 1 day at a time, same way I figure out everything else. Just don't shoot anyone else in a courthouse. Judges tend to frown on repeat performances. Despite everything, Jonas felt himself smile. I'll try to restrain myself. The hour passed slowly. Jonas spent it giving his statement to a very disturbed clerk, explaining in excruciating detail exactly why he'd felt shooting Garrett was necessary. Blackwood provided supporting testimony. Deputy Moss, who'd been patched up by a local doctor, added his account of Garrett's corruption and violence. Finally, Judge Morrison called them back into the courtroom. This time it was nearly empty, just Jonas, Blackwood, Clara, Grace, and a handful of court officials. Morrison looked exhausted but resolved. I've reviewed all the evidence, he began, and I've consulted with the Territorial Attorney General via telegram. Mr. Rourke, your actions today were highly irregular and technically illegal. However, given the circumstances and the clear threat to the child's life, I'm ruling that you acted in lawful defense of another. No charges will be filed. Jonas felt something in his chest unclench. Furthermore, Morrison continued, based on the evidence provided by Sheriff Blackwood and the testimony of Mrs. Whitwell, I am satisfied that Grace Bennett is indeed the daughter of Margaret Whitwell Bennett and the niece of your late wife, Emily Whitwell Rourke. The family connection is established. Grace sat up straighter, her hand finding Jonas's. Therefore, in accordance with the wishes of the child's late mother and in recognition of the promise made by Emily Whitwell Rourke to her sister, I am granting temporary guardianship of Grace Bennett to Jonas Rourke, pending completion of formal adoption proceedings. Morrison looked at Grace. Young lady, do you understand what this means? Grace nodded. It means I get to stay with Mr. Jonas. It means more than that. It means he will be legally responsible for you. He will make decisions about your education, your health, your future. You will live in his house, carry his name if he chooses, and be under his protection until you reach adulthood. Is that acceptable to you? Yes, Your Honor. That's what Mama wanted. That's what I want too. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Then it settled. Mr. Rourke, Don't make me regret this decision. I won't, Your Honor. You have my word. As they filed out of the courthouse, Jonas felt Grace's hand slip into his. She looked up at him with eyes that held less fear than they had that morning, though shadows still lingered. Does this mean I can call you something besides Mr. Jonas? She asked. What did you have in mind? Mama said if everything worked out, if you agreed to take care of me like you promised Aunt Emily, then maybe someday I could call you. Grace hesitated, suddenly shy. Could I call you Papa? Jonas stopped walking. The word hit him like a physical blow. Papa. Something he'd thought he'd never hear. Something Emily had dreamed of their children calling him. Something he'd buried along with all his other lost hopes. You don't have to, Grace added quickly, misreading his silence. I know you're not really my papa. I know you're just doing this because you promised. I just thought... Yes, Jonas interrupted, his voice rough. Yes, you can call me Papa, if that's what you want. Grace's face lit up like sunrise. Really? Really? But Grace, you need to understand something. I've never been a father before. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to mess things up. There will be days when I don't know what I'm doing or how to help you. That's okay. I've never had a real papa before either. We can figure it out together. Grace smiled, and Jonas saw Emily in that smile, saw Margaret's determination, saw the promise of healing and hope and second chances. Besides, you already know the most important part. What's that? You know how to fight for me, and that's what papas do, right? They fight for their children. Jonas pulled her into a hug right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw, not caring about dignity or decorum. Yeah, sweetheart, that's exactly what papas do, and I promise you, I will fight for you every single day for the rest of my life. I know, Grace whispered against his chest. That's why Mama sent me to you. She said you were the best fighter she ever knew, and the best fighters make the best protectors. Clara appeared beside them, her hand gentle on Grace's head. Jonas, what do you say we all go home? I think we've had enough of courthouses and violence for one day. Sounds perfect. Jonas stood lifting Grace onto his hip. She was getting heavier already, or maybe he was just noticing her weight now that she wasn't half-starved. Let's go home. As they walked toward the wagon, Jonas heard someone call his name. He turned to see Deputy Moss jogging toward them, his face serious. Mr. Rourke, I wanted you to know... Garrett started talking, can't seem to help himself. He's confessing to everything, bragging about how clever he was. Turns out he's killed at least 6 people in his quest for revenge, including... Moss glanced at Grace and lowered his voice. Including your wife, sir. He poisoned her slowly over 6 weeks. Said it gave him satisfaction watching you suffer. Jonas felt rage and grief war in his chest. Emily. His Emily had been murdered, and he'd never known. He'd sat by her bedside holding her hand while Garrett's poison killed her slowly, and he'd thought it was just cruel fate instead of crueler man. Jonas? Clara's voice was soft. Are you all right? No, he said honestly, but I will be. Because that bastard wanted me to break, wanted me to spend my life drowning in grief and guilt. And I won't give him that satisfaction. Emily wouldn't want that. Margaret wouldn't want that. He looked at Grace. And this little girl deserves better than a guardian who's too busy mourning to remember how to live. Emily would be proud of you, Clara said. Of both of you. The ride home was quiet. Grace fell asleep against Jonas's shoulder, exhausted by terror and triumph. Clara sat on his other side, her hand occasionally reaching out to touch Grace's hair, as if reassuring herself the child was real and safe. Pete drove, and the other townspeople followed in their wagons, a caravan of solidarity heading back to Salvation Creek. The sun was setting by the time they reached Jonas's ranch. The valley was bathed in golden light, and the house, Emily's house, now Grace's house, looked warm and welcoming instead of haunted. Jonas carried Grace inside and tucked her into bed, watching as she curled up under the quilts without waking. She's home, Clara whispered from the doorway. Really, truly home. Yeah, Jonas agreed. We both are. That night, Jonas sat on the porch watching stars emerge one by one. He thought about Emily, about how she'd made him promise to protect her sister's family if they ever needed help. She'd known, somehow, had seen the darkness gathering even before it arrived, and she'd made sure that even in death, her promise would be kept. "Thank you," Jonas whispered to the night sky, to Emily's memory, to whatever powers governed mercy and justice. "Thank you for sending her to me. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight again. I won't let you down." The stars offered no answer, but Jonas didn't need one. He'd spent 4 years looking for meaning in the bottom of whiskey bottles and the emptiness of routine. Now he'd found it in the form of a 7-year-old girl who'd survived hell and still believed in heroes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: adoption paperwork, helping Grace heal, teaching her to trust again, building a life together out of the wreckage Garrett had left behind. But tonight, Jonas Rourke sat on his porch and felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. He felt like a man with a future instead of just a past. And that, he thought as Grace's lullaby drifted through the open window, was more than enough. The morning after the courthouse brought a quiet Jonas hadn't experienced in years. Not the empty silence of a house mourning its ghosts, but the full silence of peace settling into corners that had known only echoes. He woke to find Grace standing at his bedside, her hand hovering over his shoulder like she wanted to touch him but wasn't sure she was allowed. "Papa?" The word came out tentative, testing. "Are you awake?" Jonas opened his eyes and saw the sunrise behind her, turning her dark hair golden at the edges. For a moment, his heart stuttered. She looked so much like Emily standing there, backlit and beautiful and impossibly young. "I'm awake, sweetheart. Everything okay?" "I had a dream, but it was a good one this time." Grace climbed onto the edge of his bed without waiting for permission, a small act of trust that made Jonas's throat tight. "I dreamed Mama was here, and she was smiling. She said thank you for keeping me safe. She said I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Jonas sat up, pulling Grace close. "Your mama was a smart woman. Brave, too." "Papa, what happens now? Do we just live here? Like regular people?" "That's exactly what we do. We wake up, we eat breakfast, we take care of the ranch, we have dinner, we go to sleep, and we do it again the next day, and the day after that." Jonas smoothed her hair back. "Being a family isn't complicated, Grace. It's just showing up for each other, day after day, even when it's hard. Even when I have bad dreams?" Especially then, Clara appeared in the doorway, already dressed and carrying the smell of fresh coffee. "Well, look at this. My 2 favorite people being philosophical before breakfast. Emily used to say the best conversations happened in the morning when the world was still quiet enough to hear yourself think." Over the next weeks, they fell into rhythms that felt both strange and natural. Jonas taught Grace how to feed the chickens, how to check the horse's hooves for stones, how to tell when the bread was ready to come out of the oven. Clara stayed on, moving into the guest room officially, claiming she was too old to live alone anyway, and Grace needed a woman's influence. Jonas suspected it had more to do with Clara finally having family again after years of lonely propriety. But he didn't argue. Grace bloomed under their care like a plant finally given water after drought. She gained weight, her cheeks filling out until she looked less like a ghost and more like a child. The shadows under her eyes faded. Her nightmares came less frequently, and when they did come, Jonas or Clara was always there to hold her until the fear passed. But the legal machinery ground slowly. Adoption required paperwork, hearings, documentation. Judge Morrison, true to his word, expedited the process where he could, but territorial law was territorial law. Jonas found himself making monthly trips to Red River, standing before various officials, proving over and over that yes, he could provide for Grace. Yes, he understood the responsibility. Yes, he was certain about this choice. During one such trip, 6 weeks after the courthouse shooting, Jonas ran into Deputy Moss outside the courthouse. The young man looked tired but satisfied. "Mr. Rourke, good to see you. How's Grace?" "Growing like a weed and eating me out of house and home, which is exactly what she should be doing." Jonas shook Moss's hand. "How's the Garrett case progressing?" "He goes to trial next month. Between his own confessions and Margaret's evidence, it's open and shut. The territorial attorney is pushing for execution." Moss's face darkened. "Though honestly, life in prison might be worse punishment. Garrett's the type who can't stand being caged. Every day locked up is torture for him." "Good," Jonas said without remorse. He tortured 2 women to death and tried to kill a child. He deserves every second of suffering he gets. Can't argue with that. Oh, and Mr. Rourke, I wanted you to know I've been going through the evidence from Margaret's box. She kept a diary, detailed everything from the first day she met Garrett. Reading it, Moss paused, choosing words carefully. Your wife's sister was an extraordinary woman. She knew Garrett was dangerous, knew what he was planning, but she stayed close to him anyway. Gathered evidence, documented his crimes, all while slowly dying from his poison. She did it to protect Grace and to make sure Garrett would eventually face justice. Jonas felt his chest tighten. She was protecting all of us. Yes, sir. And there's something else in the diary you should know about. Margaret wrote about why she and Emily had their falling out all those years ago. Moss pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I made you a copy. Thought you might want to read it. That evening, after Grace was asleep and Clara had retired to her room, Jonas sat by the fire and read Margaret's words. The letter was dated 15 years earlier, just after Margaret and Emily's final argument. Today, I told Emily I was leaving with Victor. She begged me not to go, said he was dangerous, said she could see darkness in him that I was too blind to notice. We fought terribly. I said things I can never take back. Called her a jealous shrew, said she wanted to control my life the way she controlled everything else. I left that night, and we haven't spoken since. But here's what I never told Emily, what I could never tell her. I knew she was right. I saw the darkness too. I went anyway because Victor was threatening Jonas, threatening Emily, and I thought if I stayed close to Victor, if I gave him what he wanted, maybe he'd leave my sister alone. Maybe I could protect her the way she'd always protected me. I was wrong. Victor's hatred runs too deep, and now I've put myself and my unborn child in danger for nothing. But I won't let Emily know. I won't let her feel guilty for my choices. Better she think I'm a fool than know I sacrificed myself trying to save her. If something happens to me, if Victor does what I fear he'll do, at least I'll die knowing I tried. And maybe someday Grace will understand that the greatest love isn't the kind that keeps you safe. It's the kind that makes you brave enough to walk into danger for someone else. Jonas read it 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Margaret had known, had seen through Garrett from the beginning, and she'd sacrificed herself trying to protect Emily, trying to divert Garrett's revenge away from her sister. It hadn't worked. Garrett had killed them both, but Margaret had died fighting, had died protecting, had died making sure Grace would survive to tell the truth. Papa? Grace's voice came from the hallway. Why are you crying? Jonas wiped his eyes and held out his arm. Grace came to him, curling up in his lap like she'd been doing it her whole life. I'm crying because I just learned how brave your mama was, how much she loved her sister, how much she loved you. Jonas showed Grace the letter. She wrote this when you were still in her belly, before you were even born. She was already protecting you. Grace read slowly, her lips moving with the words. When she finished, she was crying too. She gave up everything to keep Aunt Emily safe. And Emily made me promise to protect you, which means your mama's sacrifice wasn't in vain. You're here, you're safe, and you're loved. That's what your mama fought for. Jonas kissed the top of Grace's head. That's what they both fought for. Do you think they can see us now? Mama and Aunt Emily? Do you think they know we're together? I think they know. I think they're probably sitting somewhere laughing at how stubborn we both are and how long it took us to figure out how to be a family. Jonas smiled through his tears, but we got there eventually. That's what matters. The weeks became months. Summer turned to autumn, and the valley transformed into a palette of gold and crimson. Jonas taught Grace to ride, holding the lead rope while she learned to post and balance. Clara taught her letters and numbers, transforming the kitchen table into a schoolroom every afternoon. Grace learned to bake bread that didn't come out like rocks, to sew stitches that mostly stayed straight, to recognize the signs of weather changing in the mountains. And slowly, carefully, she learned to trust that this life was real and permanent. Papa, what if they change their minds? Grace asked one evening as they checked the fence line together. What if the court says I have to leave? They won't. The adoption is almost finalized. Judge Morrison signed the preliminary orders last week. There's just one more hearing, and then you're legally mine. Grace Rourke. Jonas tested the name. What do you think? Grace Rourke. Grace repeated it, tasting the syllables. It sounds real, like I'm not nobody's child anymore. You were never nobody's child, sweetheart. You were always somebody's daughter. First your mama's, then mine. Jonas knelt beside her. But yes, after the hearing, it'll be official, legal and binding and permanent. No one can ever take you away. What about when you die? The question came out small and scared. I know people die. Mama died. Aunt Emily died. What happens to me when you die? Jonas pulled her close, understanding the fear beneath the question. Grace, I'm not planning on dying for a very long time, but when I do, many, many years from now, you'll be a grown woman who can take care of herself. And this ranch, this land, everything I have will be yours. You'll inherit it all, just like any daughter would inherit from her father. Promise? I promise. And you know I keep my promises. The final hearing came on a cold November morning. The courthouse was nearly empty this time, just Jonas, Grace, Clara, Sheriff Blackwood, and Judge Morrison. No drama, no violence, just legal formalities that would bind a family together in the eyes of the law. Morrison looked older than he had 6 months ago, but his voice was steady as he addressed the court. We are here to finalize the adoption of Grace Bennett by Jonas Rourke. I have reviewed all documents, conducted the required investigations, and spoken with the child on multiple occasions. I find that Mr. Rourke has provided excellent care, that the child is thriving in his custody, and that the adoption is clearly in Grace's best interests. He looked at Grace. Young lady, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you want Jonas Rourke to be your legal father? Grace stood, her voice clear and certain. Yes, Your Honor, I want him to be my papa forever. And Mr. Rourke, do you accept this child as your daughter, with all the responsibilities and joys that entails? Jonas felt the weight of the moment settle over him, the weight of promises kept and futures secured and love that had found him when he'd stopped looking for it. Yes, Your Honor, I accept Grace as my daughter, and I will protect her, provide for her, and love her for the rest of my life. Morrison's gavel fell. Then by the power vested in me by the territorial court, I declare this adoption final and binding. Grace Bennett is hereby Grace Rourke, daughter and legal heir of Jonas Rourke. May God bless you both. Grace threw herself at Jonas, wrapping her arms around his neck and sobbing. Jonas held her, his own eyes burning, feeling pieces of his broken heart finally knitting back together. We did it, Grace whispered. We're really a family now. We've been a family since the day I found you in that freight car, Jonas murmured back. This just makes it official. Clara was crying openly, and even Blackwood was suspiciously bright-eyed. As they filed out of the courthouse, Jonas felt lighter than he had in years. The ghosts were finally quiet. The promises were finally kept. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first snow of the season, fat flakes that caught the light and turned the world soft and white. Grace tilted her face up, catching snowflakes on her tongue and laughing. Papa, can we go home now? I want to make hot chocolate and tell Aunt Clara we're official and maybe make snow angels later. We can do all of that and more. Jonas lifted her onto his shoulders, something he'd never thought he'd do with a child of his own. Let's go home, Grace Rourke. The years that followed were not without challenges. Grace still had nightmares, though they grew less frequent with time. She struggled in school at first, the gaps in her education evident, but Clara's patient tutoring eventually brought her up to grade level and beyond. There were days when Grace tested boundaries, pushed back against rules, acted out in ways that reminded Jonas she was still healing from trauma. But there were more good days than bad, days when Grace laughed so hard she snorted, making everyone else laugh too. Days when she brought home perfect marks from school and glowed with pride. Days when Jonas taught her to shoot, properly, safely, with respect for the weapon and what it could do, and she proved to be a natural. Days when Clara taught her the lullaby their mother had sung, and the three of them would harmonize in the evening, filling the house with music it hadn't known since Emily died. On Grace's 10th birthday, Jonas surprised her with a horse of her own, a gentle mare with kind eyes and a patient temperament. Grace named her Margaret, and Jonas watched with a full heart as his daughter learned to ride with confidence and joy. Papa, Grace said one evening as they brushed Margaret down after a long ride, do you think Mama would like who I'm becoming? I think she'd be incredibly proud of you, Jonas said honestly. You're smart, brave, kind, and strong. You survived things that would have broken most adults, and you came out the other side still believing in good people and second chances. Your mama would love that about you. What about Aunt Emily? Would she be proud too? Emily would be over the moon. She always wanted children, wanted to fill this house with laughter and love. You've given us that, Grace. You've made this house a home again. Grace was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever wish I was really yours, like born to you instead of just adopted?" Jonas set down the brush and turned Grace to face him. "Grace Rourke, you listen to me. You are really mine. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. Love does. Showing up every day does. And I choose you every single day. I love you every single day. I show up for you every single day. You are my daughter in every way that matters. Don't ever doubt that. Even though I look like Mama instead of you, especially because you look like your mama. Every time I see your face, I see the woman who loved you enough to die protecting you, and the woman who loved me enough to entrust you to my care. I see family, Grace. I see my daughter, and I see the future I thought I'd lost when Emily died." Grace hugged him fiercely. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart. More than I knew I could love anyone." When Grace turned 13, a letter arrived from the territorial prison. Victor Garrett was dying. Consumption, the prison doctor said, same disease that had killed his brother all those years ago. He wanted to see Jonas one last time, wanted to offer some final confession or apology or curse. The warden asked if Jonas would consider visiting. Jonas showed the letter to Grace, who was old enough now to make her own choices about such things. "Do you want to go?" she asked. "To see him before he dies?" "I don't know. Part of me wants closure. Part of me wants to spit in his face. Part of me just wants to forget he ever existed." Jonas looked at his daughter, because that's what she was now, fully and completely, her adoption so old and established that most people in town didn't even remember she hadn't been born a Rourke. "What do you think I should do?" Grace considered carefully. "I think you should go. Not for him. He doesn't deserve your time or forgiveness. But for you, so you can look him in the eye and tell him that he failed, that his revenge didn't destroy you, that you took everything he tried to use to hurt you and turned it into something beautiful." She smiled. "Tell him that his greatest weapon became your greatest gift. That'll hurt him more than any words of anger could." Jonas studied his daughter, amazed as always by her wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher." Grace kissed his cheek. "Go see him, Papa. Close that chapter. Then come home, and we'll have dinner, and Clara will tell us stories, and everything will be exactly as it should be." 2 days later, Jonas rode to the territorial prison. The building was gray stone and iron bars, a place designed to break spirits and house regrets. Garrett was in the infirmary, dying slowly and apparently painfully if the prison doctor's assessment was accurate. Jonas found him propped on thin pillows, his skin yellow with disease, his breathing labored. 16 years of hatred had aged him beyond his years, and now sickness was finishing what revenge had started. "Jonas Rourke," Garrett's voice was a wheeze. "You actually came." "Grace thought I should. Said I needed closure." "Grace," Garrett laughed, which turned into a cough that racked his whole body. "The little brat who destroyed all my plans. How is she?" "Thriving, happy, loved, everything you tried to prevent." Jonas pulled up a chair but didn't sit. He wouldn't give Garrett the satisfaction of seeing him comfortable. "She's my daughter now. Legal, binding, permanent. Your revenge failed, Victor. You killed 2 good women, tortured a child, destroyed countless lives, and in the end, you gave me the greatest gift I could have received, a reason to live again." Garrett's face twisted with rage and frustration. "I spent 16 years planning your destruction, and I spent 6 years raising your enemy. Grace isn't weak or broken like you wanted. She's strong. She's brilliant. She's going to inherit my ranch, my name, and my legacy. And every good thing she does in this world, every life she touches, every person she helps, that's my revenge on you, because you meant to destroy my future, but instead you gave it back to me." Jonas leaned forward. "Emily's promise lives on through Grace. Margaret's sacrifice wasn't in vain. And you? You're dying alone in a prison cell, your name synonymous with evil, your life's work amounting to nothing but pain you inflicted and justice you received. So thank you, Victor. Thank you for failing so completely. I hate you, Garrett whispered. Even now, even dying, I hate you. I know, and I pity you for it, because hate consumed your whole life and love filled mine. Guess which one of us won? Jonas turned toward the door. Goodbye, Victor. I won't waste any more time thinking about you. Wait! Garrett's voice was desperate. Don't you want to know why? Why I hated you so much? Why I couldn't let it go? Jonas paused at the door. I already know why. Your brother was your world, and I took him from you. But here's what you never understood. Your brother was a murderer and a monster. He killed innocent people for money and pleasure. Stopping him wasn't revenge, Victor. It was justice. And if you'd spent the last 16 years building something good instead of planning something evil, you might have discovered that justice and mercy can coexist, that losing someone doesn't have to destroy you, that love is stronger than hate. Jonas looked back one last time. Grace taught me that. A 7-year-old child taught me what you never learned. That's why she'll live a full and beautiful life, and you'll die here with nothing but your hatred to keep you company. Jonas walked out and didn't look back. The prison doors clanged shut behind him, final as a grave closing. He rode home through afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than he had in 16 years. The ghost was exorcised. The revenge was complete, not through violence, but through living well. When he reached the ranch, Grace was waiting on the porch. She took one look at his face and smiled. It's over, isn't it? Really over. It's over, Jonas confirmed. No more looking backward. Only forward now. Good. Grace took his hand. Because Clara made your favorite stew, and I finished my essay on territorial history, and tomorrow I was thinking we could ride out to the north pasture and check on the new calves. You know, regular family stuff. Regular family stuff sounds perfect. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of Grace's growing up. She turned 16 and had her first dance with a nervous boy from town, with Jonas watching like a hawk, and Clara laughing at his overprotective scowling. She turned 18 and graduated top of her class, gave a speech about resilience and family that left half the town in tears. She turned 20 and announced she wanted to study medicine, wanted to help other children who'd survived trauma the way she had. Jonas sold part of the ranch to pay for medical school, and neither he nor Clara regretted a single dollar. They visited Grace in the city when they could, marveling at their daughter in her white coat, watching her care for patients with a gentleness that came from understanding pain firsthand. On Grace's 25th birthday, she came home for a visit bringing a young man with her, a doctor she'd been working with, kind and steady and clearly devoted to her. Jonas recognized the look in the young man's eyes, the same look he'd once had when courting Emily, the look of a man who'd found something worth protecting. Papa? Grace said nervously over dinner. David and I have been talking about the future, about family, and we wanted to ask your blessing. Jonas looked at this man who wanted to marry his daughter, this man who'd have to promise to love and protect Grace the way Jonas had promised all those years ago. You understand what you're taking on? She has nightmares sometimes, trust issues. She'll test your patience and your commitment. Papa! Grace's face reddened with embarrassment, but David just smiled. Sir, Grace has told me everything about her mother, about Victor Garrett, about how you saved her and raised her and loved her when she had nothing and no one. I understand exactly what I'm taking on, the most remarkable woman I've ever met, who survived hell and came out believing in goodness. I'd be honored to spend my life proving I'm worthy of that faith. Jonas studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. Then you have my blessing. But David, understand one thing. Grace is my daughter. My real, actual, legally adopted, I would die for her daughter. If you ever hurt her, if you ever make her feel less than treasured, I'm old, but I'm not dead. I will find you. Papa! Grace was laughing now, tears streaming down her face. Let him say it, Clara interjected. It's what fathers do. David shook Jonas's hand firmly. I wouldn't expect anything less, sir, and I promise you, I'll spend every day proving I deserve her. The wedding was small and beautiful, held at the ranch with the whole valley spread out below them like a blessing. Grace wore Emily's wedding dress, altered to fit, and carried wildflowers Margaret had loved. When Jonas walked her down the makeshift aisle, his heart was so full it ached. "Thank you," Grace whispered as they paused before the minister, "for everything, for finding me, for fighting for me, for teaching me that family isn't who you're born to, it's who chooses you." "Thank you for letting me choose you," Jonas whispered back. "You saved my life, Grace, every bit as much as I saved yours." Jonas gave her away with tears in his eyes. But they were good tears, healing tears, the kind that water new growth instead of drowning old sorrows. As the years turned into decades, Jonas watched Grace build a life that would have made Margaret proud and Emily joyful. She and David opened a clinic in Salvation Creek, providing medical care to families who couldn't afford the fancy doctors in Red River. Grace specialized in treating traumatized children, using her own experiences to help others heal. The clinic grew, added staff, became known throughout the territory as a place where broken children could learn to be whole again. Grace had 3 children of her own, 2 girls and a boy. She named the eldest Margaret Emily, honoring both mothers. The boy she named Jonas, though he insisted on being called Junior to avoid confusion. The youngest girl was Clara, after the aunt who'd become a grandmother and a guardian and a pillar of strength. Jonas, now gray and slower but still sharp as tack, adored his grandchildren. He taught them to ride, to shoot, to understand that strength meant protecting those weaker, not dominating them. He told them stories about their grandmother Margaret's courage, about their great-aunt Emily's kindness, about the day he found their mother in a freight car and decided to fight for her. "Papa," young Margaret asked when she was 7, the same age Grace had been when Jonas found her. "Mama says you're a hero. Are you?" Jonas thought about it. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a man who kept his promises. Real heroism is what your mama did, surviving when the world wanted her to break, thriving when others would have given up, and using her pain to help others heal. That's heroism." "But you saved her." "We saved each other," Jonas corrected. "That's what family does." The day Jonas turned 75, the whole town threw a celebration. Grace and David closed the clinic for the afternoon. Clara, now 90 but still formidable, organized everything with military precision. The grandchildren made a banner that read, "Best Papa Ever." Sheriff Blackwood, long retired but still Jonas's closest friend, gave a speech about justice and friendship and keeping promises that lasted a lifetime. As the sun set and the party wound down, Jonas found himself on the porch with Grace. She was 40 now, threads of silver in her dark hair, laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life well lived despite its terrible beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Grace asked quietly. "Taking me in? Your life would have been simpler without me. Simpler maybe, but emptier. Grace, you gave me purpose when I'd lost all of mine. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You turned a house full of ghosts into a home full of laughter." Jonas took her hand. "I regret many things in my life. Taking you in isn't one of them. Not for a single second." "I'm glad," Grace said, "because I can't imagine my life without you. You're not just the man who saved me, Papa. You're the man who taught me what love looks like, what family means, what it means to fight for something beyond yourself." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "When I treat those children at the clinic, when I see their fear and pain and tell them it gets better, I can say that with certainty because of you, because you showed me it's true." Jonas kissed the top of her head. "You would have been remarkable no matter who raised you, Grace. That strength was always in you. I just gave it room to grow." "We gave each other room to grow," Grace corrected, echoing Jonas's words from long ago. "That's what family does." Jonas lived to see his grandchildren graduate, to watch young Jonas become a lawyer fighting for orphans' rights, to see Margaret Emily open her own medical practice specializing in childhood trauma, to witness Clara become a teacher known for believing in students everyone else had given up on. He lived to see Grace honored by the Territorial Medical Board for her contributions to child welfare. He lived to see the ranch that had once been a mausoleum become a gathering place for family celebrations and community events. He lived long enough to know with certainty that the promise he'd made to Emily, the promise Margaret had died protecting, had been kept not just in letter, but in spirit. The end, when it came, was gentle. Jonas was 82, still living in the ranch house with Clara and surrounded by family who visited constantly. One spring morning, after breakfast with Grace and the grandchildren, after stories and laughter and love, Jonas felt a familiar tiredness settle over him. "Papa?" Grace noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Think I'll rest for a bit." Jonas smiled at his daughter, his grandchildren, at Clara hovering worried in the doorway. "Don't worry, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Grace helped him to bed, Emily's bed, the one Grace had recovered in all those years ago. Jonas lay back against the pillows and looked around at the room that had seen so much. Emily's slow death, Grace's healing, decades of life and love and promise-keeping. "Papa, don't go," young Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her 7-year-old face. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just resting." Jonas held out his hand and she took it, her grip fierce. "And even when I do go, many years from now, I'll never really leave. I'll be in this ranch, in the stories you tell, in the lessons you learned, in the love you carry forward. That's what family is. We never really leave each other." Grace sat on the edge of the bed, holding his other hand. "Papa, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago, but never found the right words." She wiped her eyes. "That day in the freight car when you opened the door and found me, I knew. Even dying, even terrified, I knew you were going to save me. Mama had talked about you so much, had told me so many stories that I recognized you instantly. Not your face, I'd never seen your face, but your presence, your strength, the way you moved like you'd fight the whole world to protect one person." Grace's voice broke. "And you did. You fought for me when no one else would. You chose me when the note said I was no one's child. You made me yours when you didn't have to. And every good thing in my life, my children, my work, my ability to love and be loved, it all traces back to that moment when you decided I was worth fighting for." "Grace? No, let me finish, please." Grace squeezed his hand. "I want you to know that you didn't just save one child that day. You saved all the children I've helped, all the families my children will touch, all the lives that will be better, because you chose love over grief and action over despair. Your promise to Emily rippled out into the world in ways neither of you could have imagined. And I hope," her voice dropped to a whisper, "I hope when you see her again, when you tell her about keeping your promise, she knows that it was the most important promise anyone ever kept. Because it didn't just save me. It saved you too." Jonas felt tears slide down his weathered cheeks. "You're right. It did save me. You saved me, Grace. My beautiful, brave, brilliant daughter. You saved me." Jonas closed his eyes, surrounded by the people he loved, in the house he'd built with Emily, filled with the family he'd created with Grace. He thought about that morning so long ago, about hearing a cough from a freight car and making the choice to investigate. One choice, one moment, one promise kept, and it had changed everything. He drifted off to sleep with Grace's hand in his, with grandchildren curled at the foot of the bed, with Clara's voice softly humming the lullaby that had become their family's anthem. And as he slept, he dreamed of Emily waiting for him, her smile bright as sunrise, her arms open, her voice saying what he'd longed to hear for decades. "Well done, my love. You kept your promise. You saved her. And in saving her, you saved yourself." Jonas Rourke died peacefully that afternoon, surrounded by family, filled with peace, his promises kept, and his legacy secure. The funeral brought the entire territory, patients Grace had treated, children she'd saved, families Jonas had helped over decades of quiet generosity. Grace gave the eulogy, standing tall and steady as she spoke about the man who'd chosen her when she was no one's child, who'd fought for her when the world said she wasn't worth fighting for, who'd taught her that family was choice, and love was action, and promises were meant to be kept no matter the cost. "My father once told me," Grace said, her voice carrying across the crowded church, "that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway." Papa lived that truth every day. He was scared when he pulled me from that freight car, scared when he stood up to powerful men, scared when he shot a murderer in a courthouse, scared when he raised a traumatized child alone. But he did it anyway, because that's what love looks like. That's what family means. That's what promises require. She paused, looking at her own children in the front row, at the clinic staff who'd come to pay respects, at the dozens of children, now grown, who'd been healed by her care and her father's example. Papa used to say that the greatest revenge on evil is living well, loving deeply, fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. He taught me that broken things can be mended, that lost children can find home, that promises kept echo across generations. Grace's voice broke, then steadied. And he taught me that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born to, not because blood doesn't matter, but because choice does. My father chose me, and I choose every day to honor that choice by living the way he taught me, with courage, with compassion, with absolute certainty that love is the only thing that ever really wins. They buried Jonas next to Emily, in the valley he'd loved, on the land he'd built his life on. The headstone read simply, Jonas Rourke, husband, father, promise keeper. Grace visited the grave every week for the rest of her life, bringing her children and eventually her grandchildren, telling stories about the man who'd saved her and the woman who'd made the promise that started it all. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each generation adding their own stories, their own promises, their own proof that love echoes across time. And in the clinic Grace had built, in the medical practice Margaret Emily continued, in the law office where Jonas Jr. fought for forgotten children, the legacy lived on. Children who came in broken left healed, families who arrived desperate left hopeful, and every single person who walked through those doors heard the story of a rancher who found a dying child and decided she was worth fighting for. The story of how one promise kept changed everything. Years later, when Grace was old herself, when her own grandchildren asked about the man in the photographs, the one with the kind eyes and the weathered hands, she would tell them the truth. "That's my papa," she would say. "The day he found me, I was nobody's child. But he looked at me and said, 'You're mine now.' And he spent the rest of his life proving it. He taught me that family isn't just blood, it's choice. It's showing up. It's fighting when fighting is hard, and loving when loving costs you everything. He was the best man I ever knew, and if I've done anything good in this world, it's because he showed me how." And that truth, spoken across generations, was the greatest legacy Jonas Rourke could have left. Not land or money or fame, but the absolute certainty that one person, one choice, one promise kept can change not just one life, but countless lives, rippling out into a future no one could have predicted. Grace lived to 93, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all knew the story, who all understood that they existed because a rancher heard a cough in a freight car and decided to investigate, because he opened a door when others would have walked away, because he kept a promise when keeping it cost him everything. On the day Grace died, peacefully, in her sleep, in the same house where Jonas had raised her, her last words were about her father. "Tell Papa I kept the promise too," she whispered to her daughter. "Tell him his nobody's child became somebody's everything. Tell him love won." And in the valley where it all began, where a broken man found a dying child and they saved each other, the wind carried those words like a prayer, like a promise, like proof that sometimes the most broken things, when held together by love, become the most beautiful. The child no one claimed became the daughter everyone celebrated. The rancher who'd lost everything found more than he'd ever dreamed, and the promise made by a dying woman to her sister echoed across a century, proving that love, real, fierce, promise-keeping love, never dies. It just changes form, ripples outward, and saves the world one chosen child at a time.